Hey guys, hang on. Okay, well, shoot. Making a mess already this morning. Good gravy Marie. Cords everywhere. Hello, my name is Debbie, in case you don't know me. I'm also a klutz. Good morning and welcome to my channel. Hi guys. I hope everybody had a good weekend. I did. I had a hot dog Saturday that I have not had a hot dog in over a year because I was on a diet. Oh, I'm still on a diet. It was a cheat day. Um, and I see you guys have found the new member emojis. Um, Nancy, the ice cream one is just for you. Well, it's not just for you, but I did it because of you. That was your surprise. What was I going to say? Oh, the hot dog. No, it was not worth cheating on my diet for. It was good, but it wasn't worth cheating on my diet for. And then yesterday I kept getting kind of sick at my stomach. I don't know if it was a hot dog. I don't know if it was a hot dog or I was just having a bad day. I don't know which. But I would have rather had a salad, a grilled chicken salad from Zaxby's or Culver's or yeah. It wasn't worth it. Not at all. And I was so excited too. I was like, because we live west of Gainesville, Florida, and two things that we like to go to are on the other side of Gainesville. So that's like an hour drive. So when, excuse me. So when, oh, sorry. I don't know where that came from. So when Travis needs to go to Harbor Freight to get a specific kind of tool that he wants, we eat at Sonic because it's close to Harbor Freight, and that's the only one we have in Gainesville. So he had to get some kind of tool to change the tires on his lawnmower. So we were over there. I was like, well, let's go to Sonic. I was just telling them I hadn't had a hot dog in over a year. So I was like, let's go over there and get a hot dog. So I got the foot-long coney with cheese and chili. And I I opened it and I looked at it and I was like, oh my God. I don't think I'll be able to eat this whole thing. And I did. But then I didn't feel guilty. I thought I'd feel really guilty. It wasn't as satisfying as a salad would have been. I was like, dang. And then on the way home, we passed Zaxby's, and I was like, I wish I'd gone to Zaxby's. I don't know if that's why I was feeling sick yesterday or not, but I kept feeling like, ugh. All day, I was just like, ugh. I don't know if it was a hot dog or not, but so next time it will be a salad. But I don't eat like the healthy salads. I like the salads with lots of stuff in it I guess it's a better alternative than a chili and cheese hot dog, but still. Um my two favorite salads are the Zaxby's. It's the Asian salad. They call it the Zenzation salad or something stupid like that. It comes with a vegetable egg roll, and I always get it with the grilled chicken, not the fried. And it's got like teriyaki sauce on it, and then it comes with like some kind of Asian citrus dressing. And then my other favorite is at Culver's, and it is called the Bacon Blue. It has crumbles of cranberry bacon blue. It has cranberries, like dried cranberry, like they call them craisins because they're like dried cranberries, and crumbles of blue cheese and crumbles of bacon on it. And I get it with a raspberry vinaigrette dressing. It's so good. So, like, maybe not the healthiest salad in the world, but better than a foot-long chili cheese hot dog. So, but I was looking at the menu and Travis goes, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I want it all." But yeah, I try to stay away from junk food and fast food now as much as possible. But there are times when I don't want to cook and I'm like, "Travis, just bring me something." And where we live, we don't have many choices, so it's usually McDonald's. But like I said, I try to stay away from that as much as possible. McDonald's used to have a good salad. It was a Southwest something or other. It wasn't quite a taco salad, but it was like tangy Mexican type of Tex-Mex sort of salad, and they don't have salads. They don't even have grilled chicken anymore, which is upsetting. It's like they're not even trying to fake being healthy anymore at McDonald's. So, you guys pray for me because this is going to be a long week for me. I got lots to do. What? What? Oh. Um Tonight I have a sleep study. So, it looks like, what do you mean you forgot about that? I just told you that last night. So, the Karen Reed trial, it looks like it's not going to start till Wednesday. So, because I was going to tell y'all, my sleep study is going to end at 6 o'clock in the morning. So, I'm going to be able to be back in time for the trial to start. But now it looks like it's not going to start till Wednesday. So, Wednesday morning, I have a doctor's appointment at 8 o'clock. He's warning the yard monsters that he's coming. Do you hear him? Hey, Carla. You guys hear Spike? He's warning the yard monsters that he's coming. He starts barking before he even goes out the door. um So my appointment is at 8. We'll probably be done and out of there by 9. And the trial usually starts at 9. So it'll probably be, I don't know, after 10, maybe closer to 11 before I get home and settled in. Hopefully, the doctor said that where this shot in my back is going to go, that my leg might go numb, like completely numb, like not able to walk numb. So, I will get home. Oh, that's right. You're going to your son's wedding. Okay, well, we'll pray for each other. I just don't want to miss this trial. I've been waiting for this trial for so long. I don't. Well, we're not going to miss it. It's just that Wednesday is supposed to be opening statements. And she does this right after I start the stream every day. Do you really need to go in there? Or are you just complaining because it's closed? Why are you looking at me like that? It's open. Are you going to go in? Brat. Okay. So, anyways, we're not going to miss anything. We'll just get a late start. Oh, okay. Let me set this up a little bit. We are on the last part of Steve Renteria, and we are in the middle of Jackson's cross-examination. No, redirect. I'm sorry, redirect. And then we have Jane Lintamute, who I think is another like lab tech or something, and her testimony is in 2 parts. So we've got about a little over 3 hours. So that's all we're gonna do today. Why am I killing you? Because the cat's an idiot? You know, I had another funny story before we start. Let me tell you. Yesterday, oh, me too. I will pray for you. I've had many injections on my knee. Okay, so yesterday morning, I'm probably gonna lose people because I know y'all don't like it when I tell stories. Whatever. um, so yesterday, I pick her up and I'm holding her. I'm loving her. You know how she doesn't like to be held, right? I'm like, you are so mean to me. I give you those nasty treats that you like. I cleaned your poop. I saved your life. I brought you in. If it wasn't for me, you would be out in the cold right now foraging for rabbits. And you treat me like this. The rest of the day, because I just relaxed and stayed in bed yesterday, the rest of the day, she stayed at the foot of the bed. And then every once in a while, and sleeping. And every once in a while, she'd lift her head up and go, like, blowing me kitty kisses. I'm like, all right, I forgive you. She's never done that before. Never. She usually will not stay on the bed with me. I don't know why. I guess she thinks if she gets too close, I'm going to pick her up and hold her and mess with her. But she stayed in the bed with me all day yesterday. It's like, did she understand what I was saying? I was like, oh my God. Like, okay, Shadow, I forgive you. I know. That's what I always say. I'm like, when Travis comes home, I pretend like the dogs are talking. Daddy, Mommy talked to that weird box again today. That's all she did. She doesn't pay attention to us. She talks to that weird box. Well, I wasn't that sick yesterday. I just didn't feel good. I don't know. Well, another thing, we went and got, because we don't have central AC anymore, so we went and bought a window unit. We put it in the window she likes to get up in. And when Travis was putting it in Sunday, or no, Saturday, he goes, what's Shadow gonna do? I'm like, well, there's another window in the room, but it's over the TV. It's a higher window, and it would have been hard for him to put it in that window. So yesterday, before she got on the bed with me, she's sitting underneath the window looking up like, oh crap, now what? I honestly think it was, Jill. I honestly think it was. Because I was just like, ugh, all day yesterday. Like, I should not have eaten that hot dog. Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to draw your attention, Mr. Entry, to a discussion about the bullets and a couple of exhibits that I'd like you to take a look at concerning those the bullets that you swabbed and ultimately DNA tested. What's been previously marked as people 66 and 99. If we could put both of those up there, we can split that screen. I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I want to kind of move along along and make this point or ask you if I'm correct about my assumptions and then move off of this. When you indicated in your direct examination that you tested the tips of the 5 bullets, those are the areas where I'm highlighting right now that you're indicating that you tested, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And with, I think you said 2 swabs or 1 swab?
I used 2 in total.
Okay, 2 swabs, but all 5 bullets to try and get as much DNA material as you could from the recessed portions of those lead projectiles, correct?
Correct.
All right. And looking at People's 99, this exemplar gun, there are exposed areas of the cylinder showing at least 1, 2, 3, 4, and behind at the 6 o'clock position, there's another exposed area that is just behind that I guess it'd be the bottom.
Correct.
And Mr. Plord used a phrase called the void position for whatever that's worth. We're all talking about the revolvers before.
Yes.
You're aware there's a gap between the 6 o'clock position bullet and where the frame comes down, correct?
Yeah, and what I'm not aware of is how big that gap is, but I know there is a gap.
But it's certainly not sealed.
Correct.
It allows free flow for the cylinder to turn, correct?
Yes.
All right. You see the gap right there?
Okay. Yes.
Thanks, Sudi. It's about that big, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
For that gun, it's about that big.
That sort of answers that question. All right. What was the purpose, Mr. Renteria, for testing the tips of those bullets, of those projectiles?
Well, part of Dr. Harold's examination for the reconstruction, she wanted to see if there was any possible back spatter that could have occurred once the shot was fired back onto the front of the gun, which would include any exposed areas that would be directly in front of the face of Ms. Clarkson. And as you see in the photo on the right, part of that exposed area would be the live rounds that were in the position that could have received some back spatter. That was the purpose.
And were you successful, though, to you as a criminalist, that was in fact the result of a spattering event? In other words, the gun being close in proximity to a spattering event, to wit, Ms. Clarkson bleeding.
Yes.
And back spatter from the gunshot wound.
Correct.
All right. And you would expect to find, if you found the back spatter or the blood in the recesses of those bullets, you would also expect to find certain blood materials on the rest of the gun or portions of the gun, correct?
Correct.
And did you visually or grossly see blood material on the rest of the gun?
Yes.
All right, I want to change gears and move into the rest of the gun. Take a look at what's been previously marked as People 65. And we've already discussed your familiarity with these 5, or I should say 6 photographs, A through F, correct?
Yes.
I want to draw your attention to the portions of the weapon that would most reasonably be handled by a person that was firing the weapon. In other words, the grip of the weapon, all right? And that area around the grip or the frame of the weapon where your hand might be expected to touch.
Okay.
And I want you to explain to us well, first of all, let me cover one point before I get to the next. On the left portion of the grip, you did some DNA analysis, correct?
Yes.
And you did that vis-a-vis blood. You were testing blood, right?
Yes.
And you can see blood on the left portion of the grip. Well, actually, this particular set of photographs doesn't highlight the left portion of the gun, but maybe, Sudi, if you could highlight photograph B. All right, you can see the left grip. There's some, on this photograph, there's some discolorations along in here, correct?
Correct.
Along in this area here and along in here inside the contoured or the stamped portion of the grip, correct?
Yes.
And there was other blood that was visible to the naked eye along the inside of that left portion of the grip as well. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were those the areas that you were testing?
Yes.
And again, those were areas that were so copious with blood that you could visibly see it. It wasn't microscopic. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's what you were testing.
Yes.
During the course of that testing, you found that, in fact, Lana Clarkson's DNA matched that blood. Is that right?
Correct.
And on the left grip, you also found DNA, and Mr. Plord brought this out on cross-examination. I think we talked about it a little bit on direct. DNA that was not Miss Clarkson's. Is that correct? At least one marker.
Correct.
And it was an amylogenin DNA result or test, wherein, and that's a big word for saying boy or girl, correct?
Correct.
You found a Y marker.
That's correct.
The Y marker specifically did not match to Miss Clarkson because she's a female and she would not have any Y markers. Is that right?
That's correct.
She would have no Y chromosomes, I should say more specifically. Is that right?
That's correct.
So you can say definitively that a male's DNA is on that weapon. Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Plord asked you the question, is it conceivable or is it possible that it's your DNA? All right. You remember him asking you that question?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you what's possible in the universe. Anything's possible, I suppose. I guess it's possible it's my DNA, right?
You're male, so yes.
I'm a male, so it's possible. It's possible to use the same kind of broad brushstroke. It's possible that it's the judge's DNA. He's
Yes.
male, correct?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you a more specific question. Based on the controls that you have in place, are you confident that it is not your DNA from contamination?
Yes.
Explain to the jurors, if you could, in basic terms, what the controls are that are in place and how it is that those controls are designed to highlight any contamination.
Yeah, as we discussed yesterday, the negative controls, there's two of them, one at the beginning, one kind of in the middle, then positive controls, there's two of them. For this sample set that included this particular item, all the controls, all four of them, gave results that were expected. No results on the negative samples and expected profiles on the positive samples. And there was no indication at all that anything went wrong with that particular extraction set. So I'm confident that that Y did not come from me, and it was probably a small amount of DNA that was present on that sample, the left side of the gun grip, that is giving me that Y activity. Very, very small amount, and that's why we only see the Y, no other types that are foreign to the victim.
I also want to make sure that the jurors understand exactly what it was that you found when you found your own profile when you were doing some of your lab work. Most of us are not familiar with DNA, all right? So I'm going to try to use some layman's terms in my questioning. Tell me if I'm correct, or if I need correcting, please do so. There was no contamination of any evidence sample in this case, correct?
Correct.
Zero contamination of any evidence sample in this case at all.
That's correct.
All right.
Yes.
What you do before you begin a run, and I'm using that in the loosest terminology, I suppose, the loosest way. What you do before you begin a run is you start with I think you called it a blank reagent, correct? A blank reagent batch?
Reagent blank, yes.
Okay, I'll reverse myself. A reagent blank. And that blank is supposed to go through the whole system, all right? And at the end, develop no DNA to show that it's a clean blank, correct?
Correct.
All right. What you're telling us happened is at the end of one of your runs, okay? At the end of one of those runs, the reagent blank actually showed your profile. Is that right?
Yes.
So it was not an evidence sample in this case, any swab from the gun, any swab from, or a sample from the jacket or from the dress or from the chair or anything like that. It was not any evidence sample that had your DNA in it, correct?
Correct.
It was just a blank, right?
Yes.
So you don't use that blank again. Is that right?
That's right.
In other words, what's in that blank is not contaminated in any evidence sample. It's not mixed with anything, correct?
That's right. There's no indication that that contamination was present in any other sample in that set.
All right. However, even though your profile appeared in that blank and you ran the other samples after that blank had been run and you ran the other samples, you were confident based on the consistency of all the samples that you ran that what was run in that set was fine. Is that right?
That's correct.
It was not contaminated. What you'd be worried about is if you got a profile that you had no idea where it came from, correct?
Yes.
But in this case, you knew that that evidence blank came from you, so you could eliminate everybody else. It came from you. And all of the other samples that were run in that set were consistent with everything else you had done in this case, and you were confident that there was no problems, correct?
Correct.
Now, that was done at one time, and I think you said that you were running some of the sex kit samples when that blank came up with your DNA, correct?
That's right.
All right. Now, let's fast forward 2 months later. It was 2 months separated, 2 months apart when you ran the samples concerning the gun in that left grip area, correct?
That's correct. It was a little over 2 months before I started the DNA extraction for the gun samples.
Tell me what you mean by that. In other words, did the gun samples or the gun sample extractions come first, or the sex kit extractions come?
The sex kit extractions were done fairly quickly after the crime scene was performed. And the gun samples, because they had to go through the reconstruction analysis for Dr. Harold, weren't even sampled probably for a month or a month and a half after the incident occurred. Then I didn't start the DNA extraction for about 2 months or a little after the sex kits were looked at.
When you started the DNA extraction concerning the gun, now we're just talking about that Colt Cobra,
Yes.
Did you run a reagent blank?
Yes, for every set, we run a separate reagent batch.
And that came out fine?
Yes.
Correct? No foreign DNA, it was clean DNA, and then you went on and did the samples regarding the gun, correct?
Correct.
It was that at that time that you took a sample or took one of the swabs from the left grip area and determined that a male DNA appeared in that sample, correct?
That's right. It's with that set.
In that set, exclusive of the prior set that had your DNA profiling.
Correct.
All right. Is that part of why you're explaining to the jurors that you are confident that the Y amylogenin positive, I guess I would say, or the existence of that Y amylogenin is not yours?
Yes.
All right. But you do know, and I'll use this phrase even though I don't believe it exists in the law. I'll use it here because Mr. Plord did a couple of times. You're convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that a third-party male, another male, his DNA is on that gun and it ain't yours, right?
I'm sorry, you said third party.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. You're convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that a male's DNA is on that gun and it's not yours.
Yes.
But you cannot exclude Philip Spector, correct?
Correct. Or any other male.
Right.
Don't be a fool in April or any time of the year.
I bought a shed from one of your competitors and they just dropped it on my property and the floor rotted.
You got fooled.
The Shed Ranch locks, levels, and anchors every shed to Florida code. It's not only a proper way to
Sorry, guys.
Mr. Plord asked you a couple of questions about the sink area that was swabbed in the bathroom and whether or not you sought to do some KM testing in the basin and then down into the drain, correct?
Correct.
All right. What if and I'm assuming that you KM tested the water in a toilet as well?
Yes, I took a swab, dipped it in the toilet water,
Okay.
then tested the swab indirectly with the KM.
Okay, did you flush the toilet first?
No.
Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, one of the reasons I was doing that is to see if there could have been any trace amounts or a small amount of blood in the toilet water, enough to give a KM positive test.
Well, why would you not flush the toilet before you tested it?
It would obviously dilute whatever was there before I did the test, and I wanted to test the water at least at its most concentrated stage. But if diluting it more would give me less of a chance to get a positive result if there was a small amount of blood in there.
So the KM test came out negative.
Yes.
All right. Do you have any idea, in your opinion, let me put it this way, in your opinion, had that bloody rag been dumped in the toilet once or more times than once, and then the toilet flushed once, twice, 3 times, however many times, would you expect to find a KM positive test in that toilet water if it had been flushed a number of times before you got to it?
Well, this is just a hypothetical. That goes to the strength of whether there's any facts. The question is, are you able to answer the question based upon your training and experience?
Yes.
The objection is overruled. You may proceed.
And what is your answer?
Yes, if the toilet is flushed multiple times, obviously every time the flush happens, it's diluting any amount of blood that is there. So I could envision there could be a number of flushes, and I don't know how many, without setting up some kind of experiment, that at some point the blood, if there was blood in that toilet originally in the water, would be so dilute that I would not be able to get a positive KM test.
All right. And you didn't find any positive KM the KM test did not react positive in the basin or the drain, correct?
That's right.
But you also, with gloved hands, you touched that rag. It was wet, right?
Yes, it was very wet.
I mean, it had to be wet somewhere. It didn't just become wet, I'm assuming. It wasn't raining in that bathroom, right?
Correct. And the consistency of the blood stains, because we see these things sometimes at crime scenes, it wasn't wet just with blood. We could tell sometimes if there's another fluid in there, and it was more consistent with being water that was mixed into that rag with the heavy concentrated blood stains. That's how it appeared to me when I looked at it visually.
All right. And given the fact that there was a basin that showed no signs of blood vis-a-vis a KM test, a drain that showed no signs of blood vis-a-vis a KM test, the fact that the bloody and wet rag was laying 6 or 8 or 10 inches, however far you said it was, from a toilet, the toilet was open, the seat was up. In your opinion, is it consistent with that rag having been dunked in the toilet?
Well, I would say that would be the closest water source from where the rag was found. So it could have occurred by dumping the towel or the diaper into the toilet. It was just the only heavy water source that was present in the bathroom.
You mentioned something on cross-examination under questioning by Mr. Plord, a phrase that I'd like you to explain and expound on just a little bit. Touch DNA. What is touch DNA?
Well, we use that term in the field when we're talking about DNA that may be present on items that are touched, i.e. touch DNA. And what it represents is DNA that could be present on very few number of cells that could be transferred from somebody touching an item that at the beginning didn't have any DNA. And most of the time when we're dealing with touch DNA, the amount of cells on that particular sample, because there's no body fluids, there's no saliva, blood, vaginal secretion, semen, which contain high amounts of cells in it, that particular sample is going to have a very low number. And we do touch DNA in the laboratory, not that often, but we do it. But we don't always get results just because somebody touched something. It really depends on how many cells were deposited on that particular item. So when we use that term, we're talking about low-level samples because there's very few cells that were transferred to the item, no body fluids.
If there are body fluids, do those body fluids represent a much more rich source of DNA than the touch DNA cell, than the skin cells that exist as a result of touch DNA?
Yes.
So I used an example yesterday. I just do this because it bugs him so much and you can't do anything about it right now. I'm going to steal Mr. Dixon's pen one more time. And you can see that I'm holding his pen. I'm not doing anything unusual other than just touching it, all right? And it's a relatively smooth surface, a black resin surface. Assume that Mr. Dixon has been touching that pen or using that pen during the day, and I borrowed the pen from him, all right? But this time, instead of just touching it, I cut my finger and I bleed on his pen, all right? And then I take my tie or whatever and I try to wipe it off because I I know he's going to be upset, and I don't like it when he gets upset. So I wipe it off and I give it to you, okay? Now, that's the state of the pin.
Would you like to put that in evidence?
He made me swear I wouldn't do it yesterday.
He's glaring at me.
Assume that you get it in that state, okay? And you begin to do your DNA analysis on that pin. Assuming that Mr. Dixon has touched it previously, that I've bled on it, and there's some copious amounts of blood on it, some significant amounts such that you could actually see it, although it's been wiped or smeared. Would you expect, when you do your DNA analysis, swabbing those areas that are bloody, would you expect to find Mr. Dixon's DNA, or
No.
be able to see his DNA, I should say?
No.
Why? Explain that to the jurors.
Again, like we discussed yesterday, we're dealing with quantities. Mr. Dixon's cells would be on that pin because he touches it all the time, and that would be touch DNA only coming from the skin cells on his hand. So even though he'll have some cells there, they'll be in very low number. If I swabbed his pin before, in this hypothetical, Mr. Jackson bled on it, I probably would expect to find Dixon's profile, if not a full profile, maybe a partial profile, based on the small amount of cells that he deposited. But in the hypothetical, once Mr. Jackson bleeds on it, and even if he wipes it, but the blood is still visible, there's so many more white blood cells from Mr. Jackson, from his blood, than the touch DNA, that when I would do the DNA extraction, amplify it, and do the typing, my expectation in that hypothetical is I would only see Mr. Jackson's DNA profile. Even though there would be some cells from Dixon, it's such a low number that it would get lost in the amplification and not even be visible at the very end of the analysis.
So that's not to say that, in other words, it would be inaccurate to say, based on those results, based on the results you've just given to the jurors in that hypothetical, that Mr. Dixon's DNA is not on that pin. That's inaccurate. You're simply saying that because of the overwhelming amount of fluid material that you've been able to test, his DNA is so small in comparison to that, that it would be overwhelmed and you simply wouldn't see it, correct?
Correct.
All right. Another hypothetical. Can we have 65? I want to ask you basically a similar hypothetical, but with use of this Colt Cobra and the materials that we're talking about. And I want to concentrate your opinion, or I want to concentrate this question, I should say, and ask your opinion about those areas that you would expect somebody to touch when they're holding the gun naturally, all right? You saw those areas visually, and you can see the blood staining around those areas where the hand would normally go. The frame area, above and behind the trigger, the right side of the grip, the left side of the grip, those areas that the normal hand fit around, all right? You saw blood and materials on that part of the gun, correct?
Correct.
Were those fluids what you were seeking to swab up and test for DNA?
Yes. What the goal was to take samplings of the blood.
All right.
The goal was not to try to find areas on the gun where no blood was visible in order to try to figure out who could have touched the gun.
All right.
So the samples I collected with the assistance of Dr. Harold were to sample the blood on those particular items around the handle.
Assuming hypothetically that gun was in the hand of a person, all right, and that person put the gun in Lana Clarkson's mouth, all right, and the weapon was fired. The trigger was pulled, the weapon was fired.
Okay.
And a certain amount of blood blew back or came back from that injury, from that wound, all right, and it got on the gun. Those areas were then wiped or the blood was somehow moved or removed partially. You then get the gun, all right, and you swab those areas that you just described for the jurors. Would you expect to find the gun holder's DNA in those results, or would you expect to find the victim, Lana Clarkson's DNA?
It would just be from the blood, and in this case, victim's Lana Clarkson's DNA.
Similar to how you've described my blood sort of overwhelming, or my red blood cells overwhelming the DNA, the touch DNA from Mr. Dixon on the pin, is that what you're describing would likely happen in this case on the gun, in the hypothetical that I just gave you?
Yes, but it would be the white blood cells.
I said red blood cells. I knew I was going to get that wrong. It's the white blood cells that have the nuclei, correct?
Correct.
And the DNA. The red blood cells have no nucleus and no DNA, correct?
Correct.
All right. But forgetting my scientific challenges, the example that you gave about, or the answer that you gave to my hypothetical question about the pin and the overwhelming amount of DNA kind of hiding the touch DNA, that would be consistent with what you'd expect to find on the gun, correct?
Yes.
And the fact that you didn't find anybody else's DNA on that, for instance, those portions, those bloody portions of the gun, that is not surprising to you, correct?
Correct.
And it does not mean that nobody else was holding that gun or touching or manipulating that weapon, does it?
That's correct.
May I have just a moment?
Yes.
That's all I have this time.
Thank you. Recross.
A few more questions. We're going to try to finish this up, Mr. Renteria. Appreciate your patience. I want to follow up on what Mr. Jackson was talking to you about regarding Mr. Dixon's pen, his favorite pen, as we've referred to that. And he basically gave you sort of a hypothetical situation where if so much of his DNA gets on it, that would overwhelm the sample. And even though we presume Mr. Dixon's DNA would be on that, you wouldn't be able to find it. Basically, that was the point of his question. You understood that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then there was one series of questions where you said that, well, depending on how much DNA was on that sample, on that pen, you might be able to see a partial profile of Mr. Dixon if there was just some DNA from Mr. Jackson and not a whole lot from Mr. Dixon.
No, I didn't say that. What I
Okay.
had said was if Mr. Dixon was the only one handling that pin,
Okay.
there could be enough cells just from the touch DNA for me to get a partial profile of Mr. Dixon's DNA.
Okay.
Without Mr. Jackson ever touching it or bleeding on it.
Okay. Well, if you had Mr. Jackson's DNA on that pin, would that prove that he actually touched that pin?
If I had Mr. Jackson's DNA on the pin,
In other words, just a partial profile?
well, it would depend on what type of body fluid. He could have dripped a drop of blood on it, and I would have Mr. Jackson's DNA. It doesn't mean he touched it.
Right. Look at that microphone right in front of you. We may very well find your DNA on that. You haven't really touched it, have you?
Probably everybody that's been up here.
Right. A mixture of a lot of people.
Yes.
Okay. And that's because just when you talk, a little bit of, I want to call it things that you can't even see, but a little bit of aerosolic spittle comes out and it would land right on that microphone. In fact, if you swab that microphone, it would be loaded with a lot of people's DNA.
What happened? What happened? What just happened? Seriously, Court TV. I got a black screen. I was listening to that, Court TV. I don't even know where we were. It was at the beginning of redirect, right? No, not redirect. Recross. Why did it do that?
That gun was in the hand of a
comes out and it would land right on that microphone. In fact, if you swab that microphone, it would be loaded with a lot of people's DNA, correct?
Yes.
And you've never touched that actually, have you?
I have, but
Okay.
if I didn't touch it.
So you might have somebody's DNA on your hand.
Exactly.
And
I gotta go wash my hands.
And saliva actually, or stuff that comes out of the mouth is.
That was weird, and now it's buffering. What the heck?
Would land right on that microphone. In fact, if you swab that microphone, it would be loaded with a lot of people's DNA, correct?
Yes.
And you've never touched that actually, have you?
I have, but
Okay.
if I didn't touch it.
So you might have somebody's DNA on your hand.
Exactly.
And
I gotta go wash my hands.
And saliva actually, or stuff that comes out of the mouth, is a very rich source of DNA. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so Mr. Jackson could, just because he's close to that pen, he could somehow get a little bit of his DNA on that. It wouldn't be a shock to you to see that, correct? Even though he doesn't touch it.
Yes.
Okay, and you might be able to develop a profile that is as rare as the one that was on it being his DNA as compared to another person.
So he's trying to say that Spector didn't touch the gun, even though they found his DNA on it.
Is 1 in 94,000. You might be able to develop that statistic. Is that true?
True.
Okay, but if him and Mr. Dixon were both in the same room, coincidence if it was somebody else in the same room and his DNA was on that pin and it was 1 in 94,000, it would be extraordinarily unlikely that it would be some random person. 1 in 94,000 people, correct?
Well, I would only deal with the DNA that I find. I wouldn't take into account as far as that number if he was in the room or not. It's what the scientific results show.
Okay, you testify 1 in 94,000, the scientific result, but the common sense tells you the fact that he happened to be in the room, common sense, outside of science, plays a part in the analysis.
Objection. It appears to call for speculation.
It depends. Does that play a part in your analysis?
Any types and the number I obtain.
Is one aspect of it, but common sense tells you the fact that he's in the room would logically tell you that it's more likely to be his. In other words, the number is just part of the equation.
I'm going to object on relevance grounds.
I'm going to sustain it. It's argumentative. If you want to argue it later, you may. It's not appropriate for a question to this witness. Sustain.
Mr. Renteria, when you are asked whether or not there could be somebody's DNA, but you can't see it, you're basically just making a statement that your testing can't find it, and whether it's there or not is pure speculation. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't call it speculation. It's based on experience of touch DNA type samples.
In your experience, have you ever actually done any research on touch DNA and published any reports on that or published any articles on that subject?
No, just casework, no research and no publications.
Okay. And when you talk about the touch DNA, you're not talking about a situation where somebody maybe sneezes in their hand and then they've got a lot of DNA on their hand, and then when they touch something, they're going to transfer a lot more, correct?
Right, because that goes now beyond touch DNA.
Right.
You're obviously transferring another body fluid with your hands. So when I talk about touch DNA, it's with no body fluids on your hands and you touch something.
Okay. So you really have to know the history of what a person was doing, whether they had washed their hands, not washed their hands, been touching another person, before you could really understand how DNA might get transferred more abundantly than if they had not done those activities, correct?
Yeah, if that's even possible to get that kind of history on an evidence item.
A lot of times you just don't know what the history is unless some other DNA testing, tells you what that is, correct?
Yes.
I want to ask you a few questions about your controls. The control that you developed your full genetic profile in, including your mailed, showed you were mailed also, everything, correct?
No, the reagent batch that was contaminated by my DNA was a very, very small amount. And I was only able to get a partial profile, meaning I was only able to amplify one kit out of the 2 kits.
Okay.
If I had enough DNA, or if there was more DNA of me in that sample, I would have amplified both kits and got a full DNA mark profile. It's enough to do the. I had to use up the sample to even get that 9.
Okay, so you did the nine different locations, including the sex marker, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you got results over your threshold limit as to each of those markers, is that true?
That's true.
Okay. Well over 75 RFU on each sample, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know how far over, but it was over 75.
Okay. And you compare that to the Y marker on the left grip of the gun, you got 75 when you did it twice, and you only got it one time at 75. Is that correct?
That's right. With Profiler Plus, which is the one kit that gives the 9 markers, it was only that particular kit where the peak height or the RFU reached 75, and that's why it was called the Y.
Okay. Now, you've seen pictures of, and you were there when the gun was collected. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you saw that somebody was holding it with gloves, but they were, I guess there was some discussion going on the collection of the gun, what was in it and so forth?
Well, that particular job was left for the detectives. They wanted to note the gun, collect the gun, and they actually are the ones that transferred the gun eventually to the crime lab. I did not take that gun myself that particular night.
Okay, but they were holding it, and you saw pictures of them holding it and showing it to each other?
I saw a picture of Detective Katz holding the gun, examining the gun with a pair of latex gloves, yes.
Okay, and would there be any, I mean, is it possible that a little bit of his DNA when he was talking, maybe got on that gun?
Well, I would assume Detective Katz would be careful because they are trained on how to protect evidence, but in the realm of anything's possible, sure.
Yeah, he wasn't wearing a mask, for example.
No.
Okay. In the luminol testing that you did, well, let me ask you this. Is there a professional organization that deals with blood spatter that you're familiar with?
I believe there is. I don't really follow them. I don't even know what they're called, but I think there still is an organization nationally, I'm not sure how big it is, that call themselves, Blood Spatter Association of America or something like that.
International Blood Spatter Association?
That could be it.
In other words, experts who really get into that belong to this organization, whatever it is?
Right.
Objection, the calls for speculation. You wouldn't know that.
He said he thinks he knows of it. We'll just leave it there.
You're familiar with it. There are professional organizations for people that are, that deal with blood pattern and blood reconstruction work. Is that correct?
Well, I think what I was trying to say, I'm pretty sure there's at least one organization that deals with that subject matter.
Okay. And do you know whether or not they've done research in the area of luminol? That organization has conducted research in that field?
I'm not aware.
Okay. If I could have a minute.
Yes.
This blood stain organization indicated in its research that luminol is not good to pick up specks of blood. Would you disagree with that, Mr. Renteria?
It's a hypothetical. Assuming that there's a paper or a position paper, would you disagree with the proposition that luminol is not good for picking up specks of blood?
Yeah, I would disagree with that. I think luminol can pick up specks of blood.
Okay. And would you disagree that if that organization stated that in carpeting, that in particular luminol is not good at picking up specks of blood, if that were the case?
Again,
I'm going to sustain the objection because of the way you're asking the question. If you want to just ask him if he agrees or disagrees with a position, that's fine. As to who it comes from and assuming that they've said it, that brings in too much hearsay at this point. But you're certainly free to ask him whether he agrees or disagrees with the position.
Okay. I'll just let it go for
All right.
the evidence, Your Honor. Thank you. If I could just have a minute, I think I'm almost done here. As far as your work in blood stain or blood pattern, you're not a member of that organization or any similar organization, is that true?
That's true.
Okay, and do criminalists like yourself, do they have any type of certifying organization where a criminalist can be certified in particular areas of forensic science?
Yes.
Okay, and are you certified in any type of a blood stain or blood pattern field?
I don't know personally if there is any certification for that particular field. I know there's certification in general forensic science and also molecular biology as it relates to forensic science, and I am certified in those two.
Now, Mr. Renteria, I want to try to finish up here and talk a little bit about this frequency regarding the scrotum swab that was tested by yourself, and you developed a profile of basically two people's DNA, correct?
Correct.
And basically your opinion, and you don't have any question that it appears to be a sample that has two people's DNA, correct?
That's what it's consistent with.
Okay, it's not consistent with one. In fact, you can positively, beyond a shadow of a doubt, say that it has to be more than one person, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it theoretically could be three, but it's more likely two, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and one of the profiles is, and it was taken off of Mr. Spector's scrotum, so you would be shocked if it didn't contain his DNA. That would just be something out of the ordinary, correct?
That's right. We would expect his DNA to be on that sample.
Okay, and the foreign profile that did not belong to Mr. Spector, you know that certain genetic markers, because certain ones he didn't inherit, so they couldn't be from him, you know that they had to be from a second person, is that correct?
Yes.
And you know from your other testing of that sample that it was not blood, because you did a Kastle-Meyer test and it was negative, is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And you also looked at actually did the stain and did some cellular analysis, and you saw what you thought were epithelial cells, is that correct?
I think I said they were possible epithelial cells because they didn't stain in the exact way we like to see to definitely say epithelial cells.
So leaning towards epithelial cells, let's say, would be possibly, that would be what they
Possible epithelial cells.
And we know they have DNA in it.
Yes.
Okay. And we know that the DNA in epithelial cells, we know that, well, let me ask you this. And then you did an amylase test that was positive, correct?
Weak positive, yes.
Weak positive. Amylase saliva, epithelial cells. Okay, well, amylase, higher concentration in saliva, correct?
Correct.
Then you have a DNA profile that's from another person, and if you tested 94,000 people, you might find one other person who had a similar profile. Is that correct?
Again, I might find one other person that would also be included as a potential donor to the minor types of that sample.
And the rest would be excluded in that 94,000 number. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. But you don't consider that also in the testing that you've done, you find samples from the left breast of Lana Clarkson that had Mr. Spector's DNA. In other words, you've got two coincidences occurring at the same time, right? You don't add the numbers together, do you?
Excuse me, just a second.
I'm sorry. Objection, that's argumentative.
Sustain.
Let me ask you this question. With reference to the gun and the testing of the gun, what date did you actually do your testing of the gun, your DNA testing?
The sampling of the gun?
Sampling, DNA testing, you sampled it, you did your DNA test. When did you do that?
Might I refer to my notes?
Sure, please do that.
The sampling of the gun, which again I did with Dr. Harold, occurred on May 29th, 2003.
So you were at the scene on February 3rd, correct?
Correct.
And then it was about well over 3 months, almost 4 months later that you sampled the gun?
Yes.
Okay. And had you already looked at the gun and then sent those white particles to some odontologist by the time that you did your sampling?
No. Once I observed the gun in the white material, I did notice there was blood on it. But again, as I previously testified, I had it photographed. Then the next day, it was delivered to Dr. Harold. She had it in her possession until I sampled it. I did not sample the white material to process and give to an odontologist.
Before you sampled it, that was months later, that was May 29th of 03. Had you been given any information that would help you in your evaluation of this case as to what that white material might have been?
Yes, through verbal conversations with Dr. Harold, at some point she had the opinion that that was possible dental material or from a tooth or teeth wedged into that serrated part of the front sight. But it was just verbal communication in the hallway and when we would talk about the case and other aspects.
Okay. And dental material that presumably was from Lana Clarkson, given the fact that she lost dental material during this event, correct?
Correct.
And the import of that would be that the gun was inside her mouth when it was fired. That was your understanding, is that correct?
Well, I believe that's what Dr. Harold is using that as far as her conclusion of the reconstruction, but I can't speak for her. You'd have to ask her if she's using that as part of her opinion of what occurred.
Okay, but I'm really trying to understand that back in May 29th of 03, you're concerned with testing the blood to see if it belonged to Lana Clarkson, basically. Is that correct, genetically?
Yes, the blood stains were sampled to see if the blood was consistent with Lana Clarkson's sample or not.
Okay, but you already knew that it appeared that the gun was inside her mouth. In other words, there didn't seem to be a question about that this was the gun that caused her death and that it was inside her mouth. I mean, you already knew that.
Objection. Did you know that, sir?
No.
All right.
Okay, you knew that there was dental material that she lost and that you knew that some of it was on the side of the gun, correct?
Well, I didn't know it personally. This is something that another expert has an opinion on, Dr. Harold, and she would be better to ask her if that was in fact dental material.
Didn't she tell you that before you did your sampling of the gun?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew that she knew, in other words, you relied upon her analysis that the gun was inside the mouth at the time it was fired.
I'm going to object that this is
I'm not for the truth of the matter asserted. I think I see where counsel is going. So it's not being admitted for the truth, but to show his understanding and other matters that may have followed. You may proceed.
I mean, that's what you assumed when you did, before you did your sampling, correct?
Yeah, I know that was her feeling at the time. I don't know if she reached a final opinion, but her feeling at the time, given what she had evaluated, is she told me that the gun was most likely in her mouth when it went off.
And then you add to that some facts that you knew about. You had been to the crime scene or the death scene, depending on which side of the table you come from, and you'd seen tooth material that was collected by yourself and Mr. Connell, correct?
Correct. We saw possible tooth material at the scene, and the gun was in a position underneath her legs on the carpet.
That is not the first time he's done that. And I think that sounds worse than saying murder scene. Because he's accentuating it. Accentuate? Is that the right word? He's calling attention to it. The murder scene. Or the death scene. Depending on what side of the table you're on. That's sneaky.
Okay. And the tooth material being on the side of the gun would suggest to you, if that was really tooth material, that it was inside her mouth when it was fired. I mean, 2 and 2 seems to suggest that.
Yes,
Okay. So before you even did any sampling of the gun, you basically, that was sort of the working premise that you had. Isn't that true?
again, I don't know where you're trying to get with those questions. I cannot identify tooth material.
Okay.
But given what Dr. Harold said, it was her opinion at the time that the gun was most likely in Lana Clarkson's mouth, and that probably was dental material on the site and resulted in the breaking of her teeth, which we found possible dental material at the crime scene.
Okay. And when you tested the bullets the same time you tested the gun, is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And you had the same information when you tested the bullets as you did when you tested the gun, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, had the gun been fingerprinted at all by the time that you swabbed it, or do you know?
I don't know.
Do you know whether it was held for fingerprints or?
I believe it was processed for fingerprints, but I don't know the specific order of when it was actually processed.
Okay. When you sample an item, can you see the telltale signs of fingerprint processing?
Yeah, I think we went over this already, but on occasion, you can tell if something was processed. However, there's sometimes you can't.
Okay. And did you ever sample the gun again, other than this one time on May 29th, 2003?
Yes.
Okay. When was that?
I believe it was maybe a few months after. I wanted to make sure to, because there was so much blood on the gun, I wanted to make sure that I would collect other samples for possible future analysis if anybody wanted to analyze any of the remaining blood that I did not do DNA typing on, both prosecution and the defense side.
Okay, so you collected additional blood from the weapon, but because you've already tested a number of areas, you didn't go ahead and do the actual testing. Is that correct?
That's right. It was about 2 weeks after, and I did it for the purposes of preserving that blood on swabs, frozen, in case somebody want to analyze it at a later date.
Okay, very good. Let me just check real quick. I want to make sure that there's no question about this one issue here, Mr. Renteria, then we'll wrap it up. On the scrotum swab that was taken from Mr. Spector, all of the genetic markers that were identified by you in your testing that did not correspond to Mr. Spector, in other words, all the types that were different than his, you found more than one. That's true, correct?
Yes.
All the ones that were different than Mr. Spector, each and every one of those was 100% consistent with Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
Yes.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Redirect.
I think I can finish this up.
Go ahead.
Quick. What is secondary transfer? What does that mean?
If you have, let's say, DNA from some other source than your own, and as an example, we could use a hand. So if I came over to Mr. Jackson and, slapped him in the face maybe and got some of his saliva on my hand.
I forgive you for that.
And touch this surface, I would have a secondary transfer of his DNA from his saliva on this surface. He didn't touch it, but I created that by doing a secondary transfer.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Recross.
Nothing further.
Thank you. First of all, based on your testimony, we're going to close down the microphone. And thank you very much for being here.
I love this judge.
My name is Jamie Lintmoot, Jaime space Lintemoot.
Thank you. You may.
Your Honor,
Thank you for coming. Being patient, I think you're.
Yes, I was.
Okay. Could you tell you
I am a nurse at the
and about your background and training and experience for that position?
I have a bachelor's of science in forensic chemistry from Northern Arizona University. I also have a certificate in advanced applied forensic science from Cal State Fullerton. Also as part of our office, in which you rotate through all the criminalists and you go out to various crime scenes and you get hands-on experience.
How long have you been with the coroner's office in that position?
I've been here almost 6 years.
So if I asked you what your job was on February 3rd, 2003, you had the same job, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now you told us you're a criminalist for the coroner's office. Do you know Steve Renteria?
Yes, I do.
He's a criminalist also, correct?
He is a criminalist at the sheriff's department.
And so there's a difference there. You work for the coroner's office and he works for the sheriff's department. Are there two separate agencies?
They are two separate agencies.
Actually, Mr. Renteria was here for quite a while. Hopefully you won't have to be here quite that long. Why? You both went to this crime scene. Now let me ask you that on maybe, Sudie, we can put up People's 21, please. On February 3rd of 2003, did at some point during that day, you go to 1700 Grandview in Alhambra?
Yes, I did.
And when you arrived there, was Steve Renteria there?
He was already on the scene.
So explain to me why we would need two different criminalists from two different agencies at this crime scene.
As a coroner criminalist, my job is to process the evidence from the decedent or the dead body. Steve's job, the sheriff criminalist, would be to process the rest of the scene.
And when you say process the evidence from the decedent's body, can you explain on that? What does that mean, process the evidence and from the body? Do you have some scope of, for want of a better term, jurisdiction that is your area to work in, and then the sheriff's department have another area?
My jurisdiction is specifically the body, right next to the body. I'm looking for any sort of evidence.
And when you say you process evidence, what does that mean?
That means that I recognize, document, collect, and preserve that evidence.
When you say you recognize it, what you're doing is based on your experience and your training and the in-house training you had at the coroner's office, you are looking for evidence that you believe might be important or relevant or helpful in any way in the investigation in this matter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And another important distinction between what you do and what Mr. Renteria does is that he might go to crime scenes that involve a kidnapping or a robbery or something. You wouldn't, of course.
That is correct.
The coroner's office only gets involved when there's a death.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. So in my earlier question to you about processing the evidence and looking for evidence that you think is important, relevant, helpful, is that basically what you're trying to do there?
Yes.
And when you do that, I assume you err on the side of caution. You collect anything that you think might be helpful or relevant. Is that right?
That is correct.
You said you collect it and then book it into evidence. So how does that happen?
So I collect it. I go through the necessary processes to preserve it, whether it needs to be dried or handled in some other way. Then I take it down. And then once it goes to chain of custody, it's out of my control.
Now, chain of custody, what does that mean?
Chain of custody is an evidence log, well, track of that item. From the time that is sealed to the time it goes to another department for analysis, everybody must sign that log when the evidence is received into evidence control, when somebody comes to pick up that evidence, when someone opens up that evidence.
And you, in doing so, you use some number that is unique to this death on this day. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And it's unique to the coroner's office, isn't that right?
That is correct.
Mr. Renteria probably uses some different numbers for the sheriff's department.
Yes.
Is that right? And in the case that we're dealing with, that was regarding Lana Clarkson, correct?
The coroner case number was 2003-00937.
Okay, thank you. Now, again, inviting your attention to February 3rd of 2003, what time were you first notified that you might be going out to this scene in Alhambra?
I was notified at 12:30 in the afternoon that there was a case at scene where they were wanting a criminalist to come and process evidence.
And who told you that, and when did you eventually go out there?
I was notified by my boss, supervising criminalist Dan Anderson, and I did not respond to the scene until 5:30 that evening.
Why? Why so late?
There was a delay, I believe, that they were, and also Sheriff Criminalist was processing part of the scene.
So in the way this usually works, did the sheriff's department get a lot of, maybe just part of, or maybe even a lot of their work done before the coroner's office comes out?
They got part of their work done.
Okay, all right. So let's look at People's 21 for identification. Pardon? Is that where you went? Do you recognize the scene shown in either of those photographs? We have People's 21 up for identification, photographs A and B.
I recognize the residence in photograph B.
Okay. And that's where you went that day, is that right?
That is correct.
And did you go alone or did you go with other people?
I went with other people from my office.
How many others and who do you recall?
There were 4 or 5 others.
Okay. And do you remember who they are, what their jobs were?
Yes. Along with us was coroner investigator Barbara Nelson, deputy medical examiner Louis Pena, supervising criminalist Dan Anderson, coroner photographer Richard Grijalva, and myself.
So your boss went out with you, the person that called you to go out there. He went out there too, is that right?
That is correct.
And did he assist you in some way or just supervise and you collected whatever evidence you thought was relevant? How did that work?
He was mostly there for observation, but he did help move the body when it needed to be moved.
So the gathering, collection of evidence, and then later booking it was, for at least the coroner's office, was mostly your responsibility that day. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned a couple others, and we've all spent some time with Dr. Pena, so we know why he was out there. But you mentioned an investigator.
Yes, there was an investigator.
And his name again?
Her name was Barbara Nelson.
And what does an investigator do from the coroner's office? And is she there?
She is the eyes of the medical examiner. Her job is to take down the story, sometimes evidence.
Would she assume some evidence if you asked her to do so?
She would.
All right. And the coroner's investigator also at some point usually prepares some type of report that's included in the autopsy report. Is that fair to say?
That's true.
Okay. And then I think the last person you mentioned was a photographer, correct?
Correct.
So now the sheriff's department has a photographer out there also, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay, but your department had a photographer. Why the duplication?
We're focusing on the body specifically, while their photographer is documenting the whole scene.
So who would direct your photographer, by your photographer, of course, I mean the coroner's department photographer, to take various photographs? Is that your job at a crime scene where you're working like this one?
Yes and no. When he goes into the scene, he's going to do what the protocol is, take overalls of the body. And then when it gets to the more detailed evidence, it's my job to direct him as to what photographs to take.
Now could we look at People 61? When you arrived at the scene, you went into the residence, is that correct?
That is correct.
And we're going to put up, with the court's permission, People 61 for identification and ask you if you recognize the 2 photographs, what's shown in the 2 photographs in this exhibit, People 61. Do you recognize them?
I do.
And could you describe a little bit what you recall? When you arrived at the scene, is this what you saw with respect to the decedent, Lana Clarkson?
Yeah, that is the photograph of Miss Clarkson slumped over in the chair. It's exactly as I saw it when I entered the residence.
Do you recall finding a gun underneath one of her feet?
There was a gun located underneath of her left ankle.
You recall seeing that there? Is
Yes.
that right?
Yes, I
How
do.
about as we look at photograph, well, it's in both photographs, perhaps better. In photograph B, we see a leopard skin purse here. Do you recall that there at the time?
Yes, that purse was there.
And with the court's permission, could we go to people 62 for identification? Here are the 4 photographs in this exhibit, 62 A through D. Do you recognize each of the scenes shown in this photograph?
I do.
Okay. And this is the handbag that we're talking about?
The purse.
And now you told us earlier at the beginning of your testimony that one of the responsibilities you have working for the coroner's office as opposed to the sheriff's department is for the personal property of the decedent at the scene. Is that right?
We do collect personal property, yes.
So would this handbag fall into that category?
Yes, it would.
You collected for the coroner's office.
As evidence, not proof.
To your recollection, how this handbag was draped on Miss Clarkson or the chair, if you recall, and with the court's permission, may I approach? We have our lady flyer here. Okay. As I understand it, you push this button at the top, and as you see, it'll point.
Okay.
So if you'd like to use that in any of your answers to my questions this morning, please do. Please describe to us how this handbag was on Miss Clarkson in the chair, if you could.
The purse, as you can see in the photo, is a leopard print purse, and it had a long strap. And the strap of the purse was located on her right shoulder, which would be right in there. The bottom of the purse, or the leopard print part of it, was resting on the ground next to the chair, but it had been flipped backwards so that the front of the purse was in the back and the back of the purse was in the front. The strap purse was coming up between the arm of there, and then
Would it assist you to enlarge? It's amazing what we can apparently do this. Sudi can do this. Enlarge photograph A around the Miss Clarkson's shoulder there, like that.
Yeah.
Does that help you? Thank you, Sudi.
So this is the back of the purse here, and the strap coming up goes back behind her shoulder, over the top, over the arm of the chair to the front of the purse.
So it appears that the black strap, this leopard skin bag has a black strap, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And it was, even as we see it now in this photograph, people 61 was over 2. Sorry. Thank you, Sudi. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And in some of the other photographs, B, C, and D, we see that maybe we can go back to all 4. The handbag at this point had blood on it at some point, correct?
It
Eventually did and handled it?
yes.
And how's that?
After collection, I laid it out on a piece of butcher paper so that it could dry overnight, so that when I did package it, the blood would not contaminate other portions of the purse.
And you make an effort in everything you do to make sure that there's no contamination and that things, to the best of your ability, when you collect them at a scene, remain in the same way that you found them.
That is correct.
It's not always possible, but is that your goal?
To the best of my ability.
Okay, thank you. Now, in an earlier answer, you said one of the things that you have to do at the crime scene is, among many, collect personal items and personal and pieces of evidence on the decedent. Is that right?
I collect the evidence from the body.
Was there a lipstick that you collected?
Yes, there was.
Okay. And could you describe that for us, how you first noticed it and what you did?
Okay. In examining the body and looking at her, we noticed that I noticed that there was a black oval lipstick container underneath of her left breast. It had pink lipstick inside of it. And I collected that. I put it into a paper bindle and a small physical evidence envelope and sealed it.
Let's see if we can't help you illustrate this. Your Honor, I believe our next in order is People's 112.
It is.
And I'd ask that this next set of photographs that's now on the board be marked as such as 2 photographs, and they have been marked as A and A1 in this situation. So may that be so marked.
You want 112A and A1?
Well, that's how they're pre-marked, so I don't have much of a choice.
Well, it could just be one. It's no different really than any of the other photos. It's 112, which is a photograph containing 2 photos, if you will.
Great, thank you, thank you. Ms. Lindemuth, I'd like to invite your attention to People's 112 for identification, and if it'll assist you in any way, so you can highlight or enlarge any of these portions of these photographs. Is this what you were talking about when you recovered the lipstick?
Yes, it is.
And where exactly did you find this lipstick?
The lipstick was underneath her left breast. You can just see it right here, the edge of the container.
And did you take some precautions in recovering that? How did you do that to, again, preserve it?
Very carefully removed it with gloved hands and placed it in a paper bindle.
As we look at this photograph, and this again is one of the 2 photographs in People's 112, I see a white spot there on the black dress. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Did you recover some small piece of white? No, actually a little. There we go. Did you recover something that looked like that at the time? I'm not sure that's it or not, but something on.
Something very similar.
Okay, and I think we have some photographs that may highlight that. May we mark as People's 113? This is 3 photographs, A, B, and C. It's 113, please.
So on.
Thank you. And maybe we can highlight that portion of photograph C. Sudie? Okay, thanks. All right, so could you tell us, with respect to this small piece of white, what did it look like?
It was a piece of white, hard material. It was about 1/8 of an inch in size, comparable to maybe an apple seed. It was located on her abdomen area on top of the black slip dress. That's a fuzzy picture of the
Okay, maybe we're better
item.
off at this one.
Right there.
Okay. And so you noticed that, you collected at that point instead of later, because if you move, eventually the decedent's body was going to be moved, correct?
Correct.
That's part of what the coroner's office does. Is that right?
That is correct.
So you wanted to get this piece of evidence at that point in time?
Yes, that was one of the first items I collected. I did not want to risk it being lost.
Okay. And what did you do to collect that?
With gloved hands, I picked it up and placed it in a paper bindle and then into a small physical evidence envelope.
And then later identified it with the same coroner's case number that we've talked about, and it was booked into evidence, correct?
That is correct.
Now, at the coroner's office, they must have some kind of evidence locker or evidence property department, is that right?
That is true.
Can you explain that just a little bit for us?
We call it the evidence control room. There are 2 evidence custodians who monitor all the evidence coming in and going out. They control the evidence logs, making sure that people sign them.
And when you mentioned in an earlier answer, chain of custody, that's partially what it's all about.
That is correct.
Keeping track of, once you collect a piece of evidence like this small little white object that you found on the decedent's body, you book in the evidence, it gets the coroner's case number, it goes to that evidence area that you just described, right?
That is correct.
And that any time it's taken out of evidence or someone looks at it, it's documented, is that right?
That is.
For example, and I'm not suggesting that my following hypothetical happen with this, but let's just say that Mr. Renteria wanted to look at that, and he came over or sent somebody from the Sheriff's Crime Lab to look at this. He talked to you, and you said, well, yeah, it's here. He would come over, make out the correct paperwork with your evidence people at the coroner's office and take possession of it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Evidence that you collect, and we're going to talk about some more of it as we go on, is available to the Sheriff's Crime Lab if they wish.
Yes, it is.
But they have to follow the right procedures in documenting that chain of custody. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because you're two separate departments, and right?
Right.
And you want to keep a record, a log, to be able to document who handles various pieces of evidence. Is that right?
That is true.
Okay. Now I would like to ask Sudi if we could we put up People's 40, with permission, People's 40 for identification? And these are People's 42 photographs, A and B, and I'm going to, it appears that B is just a close-up to some degree of A, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'd ask you to focus on, as we look at the decedent in this matter, the left sleeve of her jacket. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Using this photograph, if you'd like, or these two photographs, if you like, could you describe when you arrived at the scene, what, if anything, you noticed about the left sleeve of her jacket?
The left sleeve of her jacket appeared clean. I did not see any obvious blood or red stains.
And was that true for as much of the left sleeve of the jacket as you could see without moving her body at that time?
That is true.
At some point, while Ms. Clarkson's body was in this position, still in the chair, before the coroner's office moved her body, did you have some conversation with Steve Renteria about this jacket, specifically the left sleeve, trying to maintain its condition?
Yes, we did.
When did that happen, and what was said?
I don't recall the specific time, but I had collected the evidence that I could at scene, and at this point I had to make a decision as to whether I was going to remove the rest of the clothing at scene or take it back to the office for processing. In removing the clothing at scene, you risk contaminating other areas of the scene. Really messy process. So I chose to take the back to the office more at the decedent's head in a white department sheet to minimize blood flow.
And you were doing that why?
Into the rest of the body, or the rest of the clothing.
When you say contamination, it's fair to say there was a lot of blood at this scene. Is that right? With respect to her.
There was.
And you earlier to remove some of her clothing, for example, this jacket, I imagine, at the crime scene.
I have that option, yes.
But you chose not to because?
I felt that it would be better back at the office.
At back at the office, what, do you have more people to help you? Or why does it work out better back at the office?
There's better lighting so that there can be better photography. And then we also will utilize an autopsy table or some sort of table so that you can work at a level that's easier to get to.
So based on all of that, how you found Ms. Clarkson's body at the crime scene and the facilities that you knew were available to you back at the coroner's office, you thought the best way to try to preserve the integrity of the evidence as you found it was to do most of your work back at the office. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
Okay. So at some point, you did what you just described. You put some kind of sheets around her head. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how would that, I think you said that you did that to avoid any further contamination. Explain what you meant by that. How would that help?
Anytime that there's head trauma, it's not uncommon to get some sort of purge from the nose or mouth region. blood or other bodily fluids. By putting the sheet around her head, if she were to bleed, then it would go onto the sheet.
Or perhaps onto the jacket that you, Mr. Renteria, had talked about trying to preserve, correct?
We were trying to prevent it going onto the jacket.
Right. Preserve the jacket the way it was and prevent any purge or any other contamination. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So when you did this, when you put the sheet around her head, you were planning, and the rest of the coroner's representatives were planning on moving her from the crime scene back to the coroner's office. Is that right?
Yes.
About what time was that?
It was about 7:30.
So you'd been there about 2 hours,
Yes.
roughly speaking. Okay, could you to some degree tell us how you moved her from where we saw in the last photographs in the chair to the evidence as you found it and avoid any contamination on any of her clothing? Could you do that?
After I removed all the evidence that I thought could be lost during the transportation process, we wrapped a white department sheet around her head. Then a piece of department was onto the ground, and a couple of the other members of the coroner's response team moved her from the chair onto the plastic that was on the ground. She was then wrapped in that plastic in a sheet and placed in a body bag.
And then taken to the coroner's office, is that correct?
That is correct.
I think you have a different name for it, don't you?
We also call it the Forensic Science Center.
And it didn't take very long to get there, did it? About 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
It's not far from this scene in Alhambra, correct? Now, a number of people helped you do this, and you used, is that right?
That is true.
And you used, obviously, a coroner's department vehicle to do this.
Correct. We had a coroner's van with us that day.
When you arrived at the coroner's department, the Forensic Science Center, with the body of Lana Clarkson, did you continue to try to handle her remains in a way that would not contaminate any of the other evidence and preserve it the way you found it?
Yes.
What did you do to achieve that?
When we got her back to the office, we unwrapped the sheets and removed the towel from her head. At that point in time, there appeared to be no contamination. We then had to go through the regular process of photography, and we rolled her onto her left side. And at this time, she did purge from her nose. And the purge got onto the left side or the left sleeve of the jacket.
So when you arrived at certain things that you did, could you just generally outline what is done in a situation like this when you get back to the coroner's office with to continue? Tell us briefly what you do, and then we'll talk about what happened here.
Another examination. More photographs were taken to document the state of the decedent once she arrived. I'm then looking for take other items of evidence off of the body.
And when you arrived at the coroner's department, and I guess you took the sheet off of around her head, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and at that point, at least initially, there hadn't been any further contamination or bleeding. And to continue your investigation, and really what you're doing is trying to document anything that you see because it might be evidence, isn't that right?
That is true.
Okay, so at some point you rolled Miss Clarkson's body over, and then she bled from her nose, is that right?
That is correct.
And did that, as a result of that, did that contaminate or get blood on the left sleeve of the jacket that you and Mr. Renteria had talked about?
It did. There was blood on the left sleeve of the jacket after the body had been rolled over. But I documented this in my notes. I had photos taken of the area.
Okay. And with the court's permission, could we mark one additional piece of evidence or photographs at this time. People's 114, it's 3 photographs, A, B, and C.
Similar.
All right. Now we have People's 114 on the screen, photographs A, B, and C. Could you please explain you did and other members of the coroner's department did at the Forensic Science Center, the coroner's office, with Miss Clarkson's remains when she arrived there? And does any of these photographs illustrate what we're talking about?
These photos were taken after Ms. Clarkson arrived back at the Forensic Science Center, after we had opened up the department plastic and removed the sheet from her head. The first photo, A, is a photo of her being moved onto her left side. The other 2 photos are taken after this process.
And as a result of this, that's so is when you saw it at the crime scene. Is that correct?
It was not.
And to the best of your ability, could you describe how it was? How did it change? What had happened to it?
The main change, or significant change, was that there was blood now, or purge, on the left sleeve of the jacket. That was not there prior to our moving the decedent.
Now, in an earlier answer, you said that one of your options at the crime scene was to cut some of her clothing off. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Including the jacket.
That is correct.
Did you do that once you were back at the crime scene after this purge onto the jacket?
Yes, I did. In order to prevent further contamination of the jacket, I cut the jacket down the backside of the middle, and I removed the right portion first so that it would not be contaminated.
And then what did you do? Come on.
I then continued to remove the rest of the clothing. I collected the left side of the black jacket and several other items of clothing.
And why didn't you continue? What else did you collect? That's part of your job, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, what else did you collect?
I don't recall the specific order of collection, but I collected she was wearing black nylons, a black pair of shoes, a black bra, a black pair of underwear, and a black slip dress and a black choker.
And you collected all those items, booked them with the case number that had been assigned to this case, correct?
That is correct.
And they were left with the property people at the coroner's office, is that right?
Yes, once they had been dried and packaged, I took them down to the evidence control section at the coroner's office.
And you did that in the best way you could to try to preserve the evidence as you collected it, is that right?
That is correct.
Because you know from your experience that many times some of these pieces of clothing and other articles could be looked at for their value as potential evidence, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to put up People's 98 for identification.
All right.
Ma'am, could you look at this exhibit, 2 photographs, A and B, People's 98, and tell us first if you recognize it, what is it, and does it help you describe at all what you did at the coroner's office once you arrived back there with Ms. Clarkson's body?
Photos A and B are photos of the black jacket that Ms. Clarkson was wearing. You can see that it was cut down the middle. Photo A is a picture of the front side, and photo B is the picture of the back side of the jacket.
And if you need to, you could always use your laser pointer. Okay, and does this show the left sleeve that we were talking about?
Yeah, right. This is the left sleeve.
And as we look at this photograph, it's difficult to tell, but you've told us that as a result of moving Ms. Clarkson, there was blood on this left sleeve that wasn't there before.
That is correct.
Okay. Among the other things that you collected, I assume, I think you mentioned the dress, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, with the court's permission, could we put up People's 97 for identification? People's 97 is 3 photographs, A, B, and C. first I'd ask you, you've seen this before. You may have seen it before it had all the little arrows all over it. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. But other than the arrows, do you recognize the dress that's shown in these 3 photographs?
That is the black slip dress that Ms. Clarkson was wearing.
Okay. And that with the other items you collected, is that right?
That is correct.
And lastly, we'll come to the shoes. Is people's 115 for identification, I'd like to mark as 115. A set of photographs, 4 photographs, A through D, and these show some shoes we believe to be Miss Clarkson's.
So marked.
Ma'am, looking at this exhibit, 115, do you recognize the shoes shown in this photograph?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and did you collect these at the crime lab at some point?
Yes, I did at the Forensic Science Center.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's right. Thank you. The coroner's office, correct?
That is correct.
Let me move to a different subject. Okay, gunshot residue test. Do you know anything about that in your training?
We are trained to collect gunshot residue kits.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit, or tell the jury a little bit about your training and background experience with respect to what's commonly called GSR kit, but it's really gunshot residue kit, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the training you received from the coroner's department in what they are and how to use them and how to preserve them.
Okay. As part of the in-house training program at our office, as we get our hands-on experience, we are taught how to use a GSR kit. There is also a protocol written on how to use it. And basically, the kit consists of 2 vials, one for the left hand and one for the right hand. On the inside of the cap of the vial is a sticky surface. And this sticky surface you apply to the skin, and you go in it, you dab or you blot the skin. And you start at the top of the index finger or forefinger, and you work your way down through the web of the hand to the thumb, and back and forth, and then you dab the fingers and the backside of the hand until that sticky surface is no longer sticky. Part of the protocol is also to avoid any blood or wet surfaces while collecting the GSR kit.
In this case, when some point after you went out on February 3rd, 2003 to 1700 Grandview in Alhambra, did you administer one of these GSR kits? They all have different numbers, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and that's so that they can be kept track of, and the result kept track of, they're unique to each. Do you remember that number?
Specifically,
How did you use, what did you do with that kit?
I applied it to both Lana or Ms. Clarkson's left and right hand.
When did you do that? Back at the Forensic Science Center, the coroner's office, or out there in Alhambra, 1700 Grandview?
I did this at the scene.
So at the Grandview address?
Yes.
Why? Why did you do it there instead of waiting to come back? I mean, it's I don't know. Is there some reason you do it at the crime scene and not at the coroner's office?
Gunshot residue is one of those types of evidence that could be lost during the transportation process. So it's always best to collect it at scene as soon as possible.
So you're worried that, well, let me withdraw that and ask this. To your knowledge, and you're a criminalist, are the gunshot residues little bitty, little particles?
Yes, gunshot residue are the tiny particles that are emitted from the barrel of a gun or a firearm when it is discharged. And the particles consist of burnt gunpowder, unburnt gunpowder, and tiny metallic particles from the primer. The ones that they're specifically looking for are the particles of lead, barium, and antimony, and that's what our GSR kit is designed to pick up.
And you said in an earlier answer that you did this at the crime scene because you were worried that?
I was worried that it could be lost.
Any kind of movement or rubbing the hands, rubbing Ms. Clarkson's hands, any movement could brush off those particles?
There is that possibility, yes.
Okay. So that's why you did or administered the test to Ms. Clarkson's hands at the crime scene. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Why don't you briefly tell us what you did to administer the test?
Okay. Well, the first item of evidence that I collected was the white particle from the dress. And then I collected the GSR, put on a fresh pair of gloves, took out a vial for, I don't recall whether it was the left or right hand first, and started with one of the hands. I then changed my gloves and did the other hand. Once it was completed, I sealed the GSR kit.
So it could be analyzed later.
That is correct.
In that answer, you said, I think you seem to be somewhat careful to tell us that you changed gloves at some point during this procedure. Is that right?
That is correct.
And then you changed gloves again before you did the other hand or used the other swab. Is that right?
That is correct.
Why?
I don't want to risk contaminating. If I touch one surface and then touch another, there's a possibility that I could transfer gunshot residue from one hand to another.
So you're just being careful as a criminal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Did you wear gloves throughout your time at the Grandview address?
Yes, I did.
And why is that?
Same reason, to cause contaminating other evidence and for also safety reasons. You don't really want to handle bloody objects with your bare hands.
But from the scientific standpoint, in that answer, you said that throughout the evening, not just with the gunshot residue administration of that test, you changed gloves, but throughout the evening, you changed gloves. Is that right?
That is correct.
And again, in an effort not to contaminate one piece of evidence or one test or one movement to another. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that pretty much standard procedure, that's what you're supposed to do. Is that right?
Yes.
Could I have a moment, please, Your Honor? Thanks. Just a couple more questions, Mr. Jackson reminded me. With the GSF that comes out of it, I think you bear, right?
It does come out of the barrel. It can come out from other parts of the firearm too, any opening.
For example, and how would that be different with respect to the GSR that might be emitted?
Well, every firearm is different. So the distance area where that gunshot residue might come out could vary from firearm to firearm.
And with a revolver with the area around the cylinder, it could come out there too, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. At some point, did you administer some type of tape lift while you were at the scene or back at the coroner's office off
Yes.
of a dress?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe exactly what you did and when you did it?
Okay. The specific time, I don't recall. I would
Just
have
generally, were you at
Yeah.
the Alhambra address or were you back at the Forensic Science Center?
I was at the scene at the Alhambra address. During the course of my examination of the decedent, I observed some small fibrous materials on the abdomen of her dress. And after the collection of the white particle and the gunshot residue kit and a couple other things, I performed a tape lift. It's basically a sticky adhesive material that you apply to the area in question. And I collected that small fibrous material.
What portion of the dress would it help if we looked at one of our earlier exhibits for you to tell us what portion of the dress you did this tape lift?
Sure.
Okay, well, let's see if we can't find one. Why don't we look at People's 40, please, Sudie? Probably photograph A. Now we have, well, that's 47, or 97. Let's see if we can.
Yes.
Now we have exhibit People's 40 for identification, the two photographs, A and B. Does either of these photographs assist you in telling us where you did the tape lift?
They help a little bit.
Okay.
Basically, the tape lift was taken from the abdomen area, so right in that region.
So you were pointing with your laser pointer to photograph A, basically in the waist area of Ms. Clarkson.
That is
that correct? Okay. And now maybe we'll go to 97. Now looking at 97, these three photographs, A, B, and C, the same dress, but actually, obviously after it was recovered, right?
That is correct.
And probably after it's been to the sheriff's crime lab with all the Laros on it, right?
That is correct.
Okay. In using any of these three photos, well, let's just focus on A and B. Do either of those assist you in showing us where you did this tape lift to try to lift up some fibrous material?
The region that I collected the fibrous material was kind of right in here.
In the middle?
So right in the middle of the dress.
Okay. And you were trying to pick up some fibers, is that was right? Or maybe any other little white pieces like you collected? Is that correct?
Yeah, whatever fibers were there.
Based on your experience as a criminalist or coroner, would that lift disrupted any blood that might have been there, or any little spots?
Part of our protocol for collecting a tape lift is to avoid any wet areas or obvious blood areas. So the chance that it picked up blood is not likely.
At least that you could see, right?
That is correct.
Because you looked and you didn't see any there, but I guess anything's possible. Could have been small, very small little spots that you might not have seen. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Good morning, Ms. Lindenwood. How are you?
Good morning.
Okay. You're not going to be here 5 days, I promise you. Okay. All right. I'd like to just get a little bit of the time frame of exactly what you did and what time that you did it. And you can refer to your notes if you have them to refer. If just let me know when you're going to do that, okay? So that we have it on the record for Your Honor and for the court. Okay. Now, you said that you got to the scene about 5:30.
That is correct.
Now, you called it a crime scene. Had you made a judgment as to whether or not it was a crime scene?
When I respond to a scene, it's always considered a crime.
Okay, so that's a prejudgment that's made evidence because you hope to make sure that it's preserved properly in case there's a trial of somebody, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so that indicates to you that you have to do your best to take as much care as you can at the scene, correct?
Correct.
Now, when you got to the location of the house, there were a lot of detectives there?
There were.
Did anyone tell you to go away and come back later?
They did not tell us to go away, but we were not allowed entry for another 30 minutes or so.
Okay. So even though you got there at 5:30, is it fair to say that the first time you actually got to the body was about 6:12 or so?
It was around 6 o'clock.
About 6 o'clock. So you did not start, so you were waiting outside?
That is correct.
And you left at 7:30, correct?
That is correct.
And did Dr. Pena leave with you?
Yes, he did.
Okay, so he would not have left therefore at 8:30 or so. He would have left at 7:30 with the whole group, which left together.
Yes.
Correct. So that you were processing the scene then for about an hour and a half, correct?
That is correct.
And that included removing evidence, correct? Collecting it?
Is that a yes?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes. We all do that. Collecting it, correct?
That is correct.
Trying to preserve it.
Yes.
And later at the very end, removing the decedent to take her back to the coroner's office or the forensic sciences lab building, correct? So you started at 6:12, and correct me if I'm wrong, but about 6:36, you took a swab from the right wrist of the decedent, correct?
May I refer to my notes?
Yes, please.
Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Yes, at 6:36, I collected a swab from the right wrist.
And what was it that you collected from the right wrist?
I collected some red stains, possible blood spatter from the outside of the right wrist.
Okay. And then at 6:45, you collected blood, which you thought could possibly be blood spatter. I think in the notes you have it as splatter. But we all do that also, put the L in, it's easier. But blood spatter from the left wrist, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And then at 6:47, in an area of the slip dress. That would be this area right here, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then at 6:52, you took oral swabs from the mouth of the decedent, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, when you were doing that, you were doing that solely at the body, correct?
Yes.
And there were no detectives helping you in any way at that time, correct?
There was no one outside of coroner personnel handling the decedent. The sheriff criminalist was present. That is correct.
No one was looking at her purse, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, because
they could have been looking at the purse, but they weren't handling
the purse. Because under the law, the coroner has the jurisdiction over the body, and that's what you were there to do at that time, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. The decedent's
right hand was resting on top of the purse.
Okay. We marked exhibit. Have you, if you can't see that, I have another copy here. Do you see that? Okay. Do you mind if I stay here? That's fine. Okay. Okay. I'll leave it with you. I'll leave it with you. Those are not your hands.
They're not.
Because at 6:45 that night, you were actually taking wrist swabs from the decedent's about 6:45, both her left and her right wrist, correct?
At 6:45, yes.
Okay. Can you see the time of the watch in that picture?
It appears to be around 6:45.
And that was not happening at 6:45 at night on February 3rd when you were at the home, correct?
This was the night when I was at the home, yes.
Okay. Was that happening when you were there? Swabs from her.
I collected the wrist swabs at around 6:45.
At the same time?
At the same time that is on that watch.
Well, my question to you was a detective handling the purse and near the right wrist of the decedent at the time you were collecting the wrist swabs?
I do not believe that that is the detective's hand.
You don't think that's the detective's hand?
No.
Okay. You know whose hand that was?
I believe I do.
Okay. And whose hand is that?
I believe that is the hand of my boss, Supervising Criminalist Dan Anderson.
Okay. So it would not be the hand of Detective Katz?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Now, were there taser wires on the carpet at the time you got there?
There was a taser, yes. I don't recall a wire specifically.
Did you make a note of any taser leads under the foot of the decedent?
No, I did not.
Okay. And if you had seen that, would you have made a note?
Not necessarily.
Did you see taser leads being removed from under the feet of the decedent?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you see a holster being removed from the drawer?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you see a holster in the drawer?
No.
Okay.
I was focusing primarily on the decedent. I was not looking at the rest of the scene.
Okay. May I have FFFF, please? 4 Fs. Okay, now we've previously seen this, the jury's previously seen this when you weren't here. Are you in the, kind of in the middle of the picture with your hair back?
Yes.
Okay, and do you see can we go back to the full screen, please? Do you see the commode or a drawer of chest to the right?
I do see the chest to the right, yes.
Okay, now that does not have the number 2 of a crime scene notation, a yellow notation for collection of evidence in. Do you see a holster in the drawer at that point?
Not that I can tell.
Okay, and in fact, did anyone point out to you at any time a holster? One way or another, whether or not any of the decedent's wrists were checked by the Alhambra police officer to check her temperature.
I was not advised.
Okay. That is because you saw blood, correct?
I saw what appeared to be blood, yes.
And you wrote in your notes it appeared to be blood splatter or spatter.
Spatter.
Correct. Right? Correct?
That is correct.
Right. And you wanted to preserve that, correct?
That is correct.
But you didn't take it because you were doing any blood spatter analysis, correct?
That is correct.
You were just taking it to get samples of the blood that you saw on the decedent's hands and wrists, correct?
I was collecting it as an external stain.
Okay. For further testing as an external blood stain, correct?
Correct.
Not to determine whether or not it was not to determine whether or not there was a spatter pattern at all, correct?
Correct.
And as a matter of fact, you are not trained in that, correct?
I am not specifically trained in blood spatter. I do understand general criminalistics.
Okay. And you did not look at the decedent's jacket under a magnifying glass, did you?
No.
You did not use a high magnifying loop in any way, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay, and therefore I assume that you did not use a portable stereo microscope on the decedent's jacket at that time, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. What you were looking for is things that you could see in the medical terminology, what you call as grossly or visually?
Visually.
Visually. That you would not need any external amplification or magnification for, correct?
Magnification, no.
Okay. Now, you indicated I think in your notes that there were some EMT or EM emergency medical services leads located near the decedent when you arrived there, correct?
In my notes, I said that there were some paramedic patches present.
Patches. Did anyone advise you whether or not the paramedic on the scene had moved the decedent's head in any way?
That I was not advised.
In other words, would it be fair to say that when you got there and got to processing the decedent for your purposes at 612, no one told you what had happened beforehand to whether the decedent had been touched, correct?
Right. I'm given a very brief description of the scene before I enter.
Okay. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize. No one told you whether or not her head had been moved, correct?
That is true.
All right. I would imagine you assumed there had been some activity around her because of the emergency medical patches, correct?
That is correct.
Now, was it within your jurisdiction to collect those patches?
No, it was not.
All right. Now, we were talking about this picture. Can you see the gun at the location of the decedent's foot in this picture?
Yes, I do.
You see it? Okay. Do you still have your laser pointer?
Yes.
Could you point where you see the gun, please?
It is located underneath of her left ankle.
Okay. And you see that there?
Yes.
You see the gun there? Okay. All right. And when you say left ankle, you're pointing to where that heel is?
The back of her heel.
And show me exactly, if you could, just point exactly to it. Right there is where you're seeing the gun? Okay. Could I have picture BB up, please? Defense BB. Could you enlarge down near the ankle, please, Jennifer? Now, this picture, do you see what the gun is?
Yes, I believe I was mistaken in the last photograph.
Okay, so when you told us earlier that you had seen the gun at the location to the left of the foot, did you actually see the gun or did somebody tell you it was there?
I saw the gun.
Okay, did you make a note as you did in your notes as to the exact location of where you saw the gun as you just had told the jury before we saw this picture?
My notes generally state that the gun was located under the left ankle.
Okay, under the left ankle. But when we looked at picture FFFF, you said you could see the gun under the heel, correct?
Behind the heel.
And that was not correct, right?
The area that I pointed out was not correct.
Okay. And did you know how many rounds were in the gun at the time you were there?
I did not.
And did anyone in front of you pick up the gun and show you the amount of rounds?
No.
Did anyone handle the gun when you were there?
It was the detective and the coroner investigator's responsibility to look at the gun.
But I'm asking you, did they look at it while you were there processing the decedent?
I'm not aware. I was doing my job.
When you were doing your job processing the decedent, and the gun being here, did you see somebody come over, pick up the gun, and take it away?
I don't recall.
If you had seen that, would you put it in your notes?
Not necessarily.
Okay, but at this point, you don't recall whether you did or you didn't, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you don't recall whether or not there were taser wires under her feet at the time, correct?
That is correct.
And you don't recall whether or not you had seen a gun holster being taken as evidence from the drawer at the time, correct?
That is correct.
We're going to go ahead and take our recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind the admonition. We'll be in recess for 15 minutes. Thank you.
What's it in session?
All right, all parties, jurors, alternates, and the witness are present. Is heretofore. You may proceed.
Ms. Linsford, I'd like to go back to another picture of all of you at the scene. We looked at before GGGG. Now I'd like to look at FFFF. The quadruple F, I'm sorry. Oh. Now I'd like to have FFFF, please. Okay. Now, you mentioned that criminal Stan Anderson, that would be this gentleman here?
That is correct.
Sure that I previously showed you where the gun was being looked at, correct?
Yes, I do.
And there's no doubt from your notes, because you documented that on about 6:45, you were looking at the, about 6:36, you were looking at the right wrist of Lana Clarkson, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. Because that's why you do the notes, so that you can reconstruct for purposes such as this, correct?
That is correct.
Because I imagine that you go to a number of death scenes over the year, and without having notes, you wouldn't be able to remember exactly what you had done, correct?
That is correct.
Now, do you see that Mr. Anderson is wearing a blue coroner criminalist jacket?
Is a black coroner's jacket.
Black jacket, okay. And I apologize, my eyesight's not that great, I gather. Now, when I showed you the picture previously, and I don't have the scan on it, Jennifer. Mr. Anderson, you believed, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, and you don't know because you hadn't made any.
The only people to touch the body or any of her possessions at this time would be coroner personnel.
All right, and you saw the watch in the picture, correct?
That is correct.
I'd like to have a few more pictures marked. Next in order, Your Honor.
Sex tuple D.
Jennifer, it would be HG3 scan. All right, now, you were actually processing the decedent at this point, correct?
Yes, that's not evidence. You don't know what time it is.
Well, from looking at the picture, are you able to state whether or not you were processing the scene?
Yeah, I don't recall.
Okay. Have you ever seen this picture before?
Not specifically.
All right. Do you see anywhere in the location your footwear, your shoes, or your legs in this picture?
No.
Okay. Could we go to quadruple W, please? Now, do you see in this picture your shoes, your footwear, or anything of that sort?
Not that I can be certain of.
Okay. Have you ever seen this picture before?
No, I have not.
The person on the right here with the black hair, that is not Dan Anderson, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay. Let's go to quadruple Y. Okay. Do you see your footwear or your legs in this picture anywhere?
No, I do not.
Okay. And the person in this picture that we can see a portion of his face in the top, that's not Dan Anderson either, is it?
No, it is not.
Next, Jennifer, that would be 2.1119.
I'm sorry, did you say E or C?
E.
I'm sorry, this one has been marked on. I'll say that then to the next one. This is V. I don't have a previous marking on that. I apologize.
It's okay.
Okay, this is quadruple B. V, do you see your footwear or anything in this?
No, I do not.
Okay. All right, 2.120, perhaps we can then mark this, the E to the 7th.
All right. To the 6th.
E to the 6th, apologies. So I'm a lawyer.
This is E, right?
This is E, correct. All right, do you see your footwear?
E
legs?
was withdrawn because it was already marked. This is
Right.
now E.
Okay. Do you see your footwear or legs in this picture?
No, I do not.
2.122. Okay, do you see your legs or footwear?
Did you want this marked?
Yes, please, Your Honor.
Couple up.
Do you see your footwear or legs in this picture at all?
No, I do not.
Um, 2.123, let's see if it has a marking before we do it. This is a quadruple X. Again, do you see your footwear or legs in this picture at all?
No.
Um, 2.126, please. Can we have your honor, marking on this?
That would be G, sextuple G.
Were you there when this gun was put on this manila envelope?
I am not aware.
Okay. And 2.127.
Are you asking this to Mark?
Yes, please.
Sextuple H.
And this,
Is previously marked?
it is previously marked, H? It is, I'm sorry.
Okay, then we'll reserve H for the
Okay.
next photo.
And this is just a reverse picture. I assume then you don't remember this?
No, I don't know when that was taken.
Okay. And then let me just show you another picture, AAB008A. I just want to see if it comes up marked first, before we give it a marking. Nope.
All right, this will be H, then sextuple H.
Okay. When you looked at,
Excuse me, hold it. We're getting into a problem. You're sort of giving numbers, and it turns out they're marked. The clerk cannot possibly keep track of the exhibits. G was the previous photo. She started to mark H, then decided it had a marking. This one that's up now would be H. Do you want to go back and check as to G, make sure you have it?
G was, this should be H.
Okay, all right, thank you.
The X4, which is previous.
did you observe the gun in this location?
I did.
Okay. Did it have the what appears to be blood-like stains on the gun when you saw it?
I did not document anything in regards to the gun in my note taking.
That was in your jurisdiction.
That is correct.
The purse was your jurisdiction because it was actually located on the decedent, correct?
That is correct.
So if something is right next to her, that would be the responsibility for some other person.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, you also looked at the decedent with UV light.
Yes, I did.
What is that? Tell the jurors what that is.
A UV light, an ultraviolet light, is another tool that we use out in the field to help look for evidence. Sometimes you can a visual picture, I guess. The UV light may cause fluorescence in some objects. It may cause absorption, and you would see it differently using that light.
Okay. So sometimes you can see things under an alternate light source that you can't see with the naked eye, correct?
That is correct.
And then sometimes even when you take things back to your forensic sciences center, you may use an alternate light source to look at things, correct?
That is correct.
And one of the things that you saw was a lot of debris on the abdomen area, correct?
I saw some fluorescing fibers on the abdomen area.
All right. And you also then used what was called the acetone or acetate tape lift.
That is correct.
An acetate tape lift is basically a 5x7 sticky piece of clear paper that has like a glue-like substance on the bottom side, like a Scotch tape.
It's a clear plastic sheet that one side is not sticky, on the other side it's sticky, just like a piece of tape, like Scotch tape.
Okay. And Jennifer, could you bring up CD3186, see if that has marking previously? No, Your Honor, I would need a marking for this.
All right, sextuple I.
Would this be the acetate tape lift that you used?
That is a picture of the tape lift.
Okay.
It is identified with the coroner case number, the date of collection, the time it was collected, and my initials.
Okay. Do you know who put a little circle around with this loop?
No, I do not.
Okay. Right. And did anyone ever report to you back what these little items were?
No,
Okay. Now, in fact, you did attend meetings concerning, at the coroner's office concerning this acetate tape lift that you did, correct?
I did attend a couple of meetings. They weren't necessarily about just the tape lift.
Right. They had other areas in them, but one of the things that was discussed was this tape lift, correct?
At one point in time, yes.
And you were not taking, correct me if I'm wrong, you were not taking this tape lift to document any blood spatter evidence, correct?
That is correct.
That was not your purpose, right?
Correct.
Because you were not doing a blood analysis, correct?
Correct.
You were just taking the tape lift to collect any fibrous material, other debris that you may have seen on the top, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And then you only take a portion because then you leave the bottom portion for other analysis, correct?
Right.
All right. And in fact, you didn't document how many blood spatter stains you saw on the slip, correct?
I did not document
But
blood
you did,
spatter stains.
but you did see blood spatter on the slip, correct?
I did.
Okay. And when you took the acid tape lift, there was some concern, was there not, that any blood spatter that of the top of the abdomen had been compromised, correct?
Objection. Whose concern?
Well, concern, when was it done? When was the concern voiced? It's way too vague. You need to be
Okay.
more specific. Sustain.
When was the first time you heard that there was concern about how this tape lift had been done?
Objection hearsay. Relevant.
Well, it's hearsay. Sustain.
Did you ever have to attend a meeting where you had to explain to anybody why you took the tape lift?
Objection relevancy.
Overruled. I'll allow that.
Yes, I did attend a meeting in which we discussed at one point in time the tape lift.
Okay. And did you have to explain why you took the tape lift off the dress?
I explained why we took the tape lift and our protocol for taking a tape lift.
And who did you explain that to?
Objection relevancy.
Overruled.
Who did you explain that to?
Okay. Well, those present were members from our department at this meeting, and I believe that those answers went on to the sheriff's department.
As to the portion of the answer as to what you believe will be stricken as speculation, and the jury's not disregarded.
Was Dr. Lakshmanan the chief coroner at this meeting?
Yes, he was.
Was Dr. Anselmo one of the forensic odontologists, dentist at this meeting?
Yes, he was.
Was Dr. Fortman one of the forensic odontologist dentist at this meeting?
Yes, he was.
Was Dr. Luis Pena at this meeting?
Yes, he was.
And that would be the same doctor that you went to the scene with, correct?
That is correct.
And yourself, correct?
That is correct.
And there was a Joe Muto at this meeting, correct?
That is correct.
Who was he? Who was
He
he?
is the chief of laboratories, so he is my boss's boss.
Okay. And there was also a Mr. Stephen Dow at the meeting, correct?
That is correct.
And who is he?
He is a research criminalist who does the GSR analysis and tool marks analysis at the coroner's office.
Okay. And you had to explain why this tape lift was done, correct?
Correct.
Did you have to explain as to why you may have compromised blood spatter analysis?
That seems facts, not evidence.
Counsel approach the bench.
At this meeting, I just want to talk about what you said. Did you discuss the procedures you followed in terms of taking this acetate tape lift off the dress of Lana Clarkson?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what did you tell people?
I told people that I used the tape lift to collect small fibrous material from the abdomen area of the decedent. And following protocol, I avoided any wet portions or possible blood that was there while taking the tape lift.
Okay. And did you get any further up communication from anyone at the sheriff's lab or regarding it?
No,
All right.
Did you get any further communications from anyone at the sheriff's lab regarding this?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you get any further communications from anyone at the coroner's office involving this?
No, I did not.
Now, the date of this meeting that you had discussed this was March 23rd in 2004?
That is correct.
And that would be over a year after you went to the scene, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever look at this tape lift under a microscope to see if there was what appeared to be blood-like stains?
No, I did not.
Did you ever ask to be looked to see whether it appeared to be blood-like stains?
No, I did not.
Okay. Was your purpose in collecting this tape lift to see whether there was any blood spatter on the top of the dress?
No,
As a matter of fact, you don't know whether there was or wasn't. The dress where the tape lift was?
not where the tape lift was.
Okay. That's what you told people, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Did you ever come to believe yourself with your state of mind that you may have compromised a blood spatter evaluation?
Overruled.
I do not believe that I.
Were you ever accused by anyone of compromising evidence?
Sustained.
Now, had you been asked prior to March 23rd, 04, anything concerning your blood spatter tape?
Sustained.
Not asking what she said, just if she's been asked
You're
about
asking
it.
if the conversation is contained in the question. The hearsay is contained in the.
Had you had any discussions that you yourself, prior to this March 23rd, 04 meeting, did you yourself ever discuss with anyone from the coroner's office the acetate tape lift?
Same objection.
I'll allow the question whether she's ever had a conversation, just a conversation concerning that subject matter.
The only conversation that I had was at the scene when I told people what I observed and what I was going to do and how I was going to collect it. Those present would have been the sheriff criminalist, Steve Renteria, and my boss, supervising criminalist Dan Anderson.
Okay, so you told people what you were going to do and no one voiced any objections, I would imagine.
That is correct.
Okay, because you were explaining your conduct, correct?
I'm sorry, could
You
you?
were explaining what you were doing.
I was explaining,
Now,
yes.
you also took swabs from the left wrist and the right wrist because you saw spatter on her hands and her wrist, correct?
I saw blood-like stains on the wrists, yes.
And in your report, you also said you saw it on her hands too, correct?
I say wrists and hands, yes.
Okay. And did you ask anyone to take pictures of?
Yes, I did.
Was there a problem with those pictures?
Yes, there were.
What was the problem with the pictures?
The problem was that the photos did not turn out. You could not differentiate between freckles and possible blood spatter.
And that's because blood spatter is so small that sometimes you can't even see it with the in scientific parlance, it can be called microscopic, correct?
It could be.
Okay. And it's so tiny, you've learned in your experience as a criminalist that it can even flake off a little bit, correct?
That is correct.
Because once it dries, it can just, what they call desiccate, right? Flake off.
I don't know about desiccate, but
Flake off.
yes.
Okay. I was trying to be Mr. Cutler with big words. Right.
Okay. No one else can be Mr. Cutler.
Any paramedic patches that you saw?
I did not.
Okay, because that wouldn't be your job. That would be the job of the Sheriff's Department criminalist to see if there was any blood spatter on those patches, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, when you also back to the coroner's office, you did have to inventory her purse, right?
It was inventoried, yes.
And you make reference to the inventory on your report, correct?
I mentioned a couple of items. I mentioned the items, or a couple of the items that I collected as evidence. The rest of the documentation of what was inside of the purse would have been the job of the coroner investigator, Barbara Nelson.
Did you yourself ever discuss with Barbara Nelson the contents of the purse?
We discussed it.
In terms of when you were doing your report, where was in it that you put in your?
Well, I'll allow the question. You may answer.
Yes, there were.
There were, and you saw some of those items that were in the purse, correct?
I did.
And some of the items you put in your report because you were keeping them for further evidential value, right?
That is correct.
And other items were going back to either the sheriff's department for further distribution one way or another, correct?
They would be maintained as personal property.
Okay. And that means that it goes back to the family, correct?
Eventually, yes.
Okay. And one of the items in the purse that you saw was a cell phone, right?
I don't recall.
Okay. Would there anything that you would see that could possibly refresh your recollection? You don't know? Can you see it? Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I just want you to look at this and look at it to yourself. This is just to see if it refreshes your purse one way or another as to other items that may have been in the purse that you did not put into your report.
Yes, this is a list of items that was in the purse.
Okay. Does it refresh your recollection as to what was there?
It helps.
Okay. Could I have it back for a second? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And was there a cell phone in the purse? You can see it.
According to that form, yes.
Yeah, the question is, thank you. It's not whether the form says something, it's whether having looked at the form, it refreshes your recollection to where you're now able, by your own memory, to say that you can recall certain items.
Okay.
Okay, with that in mind, you can ask your question.
Do you recall, after looking at that form, that you saw the purse?
No.
Okay. What else have you seen in the purse that you didn't document?
That I did not document?
Right. In other words, after you looked at this, is there anything about your memory that's freshened up as to what?
Thing that I remember seeing are the medication bottles.
Sorry.
Some of the medications.
Some of the medications. Was it you who had to document the medications in the purse, or was that Barbara Nelson?
That was the investigator.
Okay, so it'd be fair to say that you don't have an independent recollection as you sit here today as to what was there?
Yeah, not specifically.
Okay, and we should talk to her.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, when you were at the scene with Dr. Pena, he was watching what you were doing?
That's conference.
Sustained.
Well, did you see?
Yes.
Did you talk to him?
Yes.
Did you tell him what you were doing?
At times.
Okay. And when you were there, was he pretty much within your sight?
Jackson, again, calling for speculation is also vague.
You can answer, well, if you're talking about during the entire time, she wouldn't have any way of knowing unless they came together, left together, stayed together. So part of it does.
Did you come together?
We came at the same time, yes.
Did you leave at the same time?
We left at the same time.
Were you around the decedent's body for that hour and a half that you were there together?
I cannot account for his whereabouts that entire 1.5 hours now.
Okay. But in some of the time, is it fair to say he was with you?
Yes.
Okay. Watching, did you see him watch what you were doing?
At times, yes.
And at other times, you spoke to him directly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, when you took the GSR from the scene, because it can easily fall off, correct?
I did not say it could easily fall off, but there's a possibility it could be lost.
So you don't know whether it can easily fall off. It's just a possibility it could be lost, correct?
That is correct.
So what you want to do is you want to do it there on her hands, hopefully to make sure you get the best evidence collection you can, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're not an expert in gunshot residue, are you?
I am not an expert.
Okay. What you are good at is collecting it to make sure that it's preserved, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. But any further questions about how easily it may fall off or be transferred, that we should leave to another expert, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, Mr. Dixon also asked you about the jacket, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that you were trying to do when you were at the scene was document what you could see with the naked eye on the jacket, correct?
That is correct.
would also include any further blood spatter that was there, correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
That would include any other blood spatter that you could not see on a black jacket with a naked eye, correct? That wasn't your job.
That was not my job.
Your job. Did you pull out at the scene the contents of the purse?
No.
Okay. Again, because your job was to collect and preserve the evidence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, one of the things, let me show you if we could have a Defendant's Exhibit EE. Show you a picture that the jury has previously seen a number of times of the shoes of Ms. Clarkson. Did you document the existence of the scene of this little white piece here?
No, I did not.
Okay. And it's fair to say that you don't remember one way or another whether this taser wire was under the decedent's foot, correct? And since you're looking at this picture today, you one way or another was that there, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, we have up, and I don't know if it's been previously marked, 4.218. No, we had this previously marked, Your Honor.
Sextuple J.
I'll show you a picture of the pantyhose you took off at the scene, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. On the leg over here, there is what appears to be, or what's been testified to as a Band-Aid or two.
It was two Band-Aids.
Two Band-Aids. Do you remember seeing that when you took off the pantyhose?
Yes, I do.
Are these pantyhose inside out? Pantyhose was the Band-Aid on the inside of the pantyhose?
I believe that it was on the outside of the pantyhose.
It was on the outside of the pantyhose? Okay, so just like it is here?
That is correct.
Okay, and can we go back to EE? You yourself, is it fair to say, you never discussed with anybody whether or not this little thing here could be a portion of the Band-Aid on the pantyhose, did you? Yourself ever and when was that?
I don't recall the specific date.
Is it in your notes?
No, just the collection of the nylons and the Band-Aid.
Okay.
Are in my notes.
All right. Now, oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was hearing voices for a second there. One of the things you did discuss with Mr. Dixon was this.
That is correct, a jacket.
And underneath the jacket, there was the slip, correct? The black slip. Obviously marked as People's 97A, but we could mark an independent picture, I think, if we have it. 4.195. Is that marked previously, Jennifer? Karen, I'd need a marking on this then.
Is that the exhibit you want?
Yes, please.
That's sextuple K.
That you took would be below where the breast line is on the slip?
That is correct.
Am I pointing correctly to the area of the tape lift?
Approximately, yes.
Okay. And had you ever seen this picture with all the other?
I've seen, yes, I saw that picture.
When?
I don't recall the specific date.
Do you remember the circumstances around which you saw this picture?
I think it was just the photos.
Okay.
Yeah, no, nothing specific.
Just generally, you were looking through the photos?
Correct.
These are not the photos from your coroner's office, are they?
No,
Did you have further meetings to discuss at other places when you looked at the photos, this the acetate tape left from here?
there were no further the meeting that you mentioned earlier on
Okay.
March 23rd.
When you said you looked at it because you wanted to familiarize yourself with the case?
Yes.
The pictures? All right. And the other thing, you also took out of Ms. Clarkson's purse a skirt, correct?
I took out a long black skirt, yes.
Okay. Could we have 4.209 up, please? I need a marking on this, Your Honor.
Sextuple L.
Do you recognize this as the skirt that you took out of the purse?
Yes, that appears to be the skirt that I removed from the purse.
Did you put these arrows on here?
No, I did not.
In a conversation that you participated in, why these arrows were placed here?
No,
You also took out a pair of 4.1.
You want this now?
Do you recognize these as you placed these red arrows here?
no, I did not.
Did you have a conversation with anyone as to why these red arrows were placed here?
No.
Okay. Now, the jacket
That beeping is driving me crazy. I thought it was on the video, but it's not. I don't know what it is. It needs to stop. Because I'm going to go insane.
that the blood flow could have hurt was to cover up microscopic blood that may have been on the jacket, correct?
Are you able to answer that question based on your experience?
Yes.
The objection is overruled. She may answer.
And one of the things the blood flow may have covered up was microscopic blood spatter on the jacket, correct?
It is a possibility.
Okay, and this happened fairly quickly on, the purge from the nose, correct? Yeah, you brought Ms. Clarkson into the car. Criminalists would have a chance to.
That is correct.
Okay. And one of the things that you did document with regard to the purge was the location of it, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And now StreamYard has crashed. What is it? Driving me crazy. There's nothing. Hit keyboard key. What is it? There's no other programs open. I don't have a clue. I've got StreamYard open and Core TV. That's it.
On the scene photos, the head
scene
was
photos.
tilted to the left.
And in the coroner's photo, it was also tilted to the left, correct? If you remember.
Yes, it was.
Okay. And the purge came out of the nose, correct?
That is
And one of the things.
Bad enough I got a phantom beep. Don't need you to act up too.
Documented as to where it came out with regard on the nose was the outer left sleeve of the jacket, correct?
That is correct.
And the outer left sleeve, could you point on your jacket as to where that was?
It would be this region here.
Okay. And could you
Indicating below the shoulder, sort of the left tricep area or bicep area.
Can I just focus see on it?
You may.
Do that once more when I can see it up here.
Way to the
Diagram.
I drew a general diagram documenting the area of the purge.
Okay. And on the area that you drew of the purge, it comes down, it stops around here, correct?
Did it stop? It stopped. I was charging my cell phone. It's never made that noise before when I charge my cell phone. Weird.
Approximately that area.
below the elbow.
Okay, below the elbow. And did you in any way use a ruler to show the exact length of that purge?
I did not measure specifically the length of the purge or the area of it in our photographs. Most of the time, we include a small scale, 3-inch scale from our office.
Okay, and let's see. Could I have what's been marked what's 4.204? I don't think it has a marking, Your Honor.
Okay, as soon as we see it, we'll. Sextuple N.
Okay, now this is the right side of the jacket, correct?
This is the back side of the right.
The back side of the right, okay. And then we have another one, 4.203. And this would be
Sextuple O.
Sextuple O, this would be the whole jacket, correct?
That is the back side of the left and right side of the jacket.
So when you just indicated for the court that the purge came down below the elbow, right?
That is correct.
Okay. It did not, according to your notes, go to the bottom of the jacket here, did it?
That is correct.
All right. It did not go to the buttons on the bottom of the jacket here, did it?
That is correct.
Okay. And if it had, you would have documented that, correct?
Yes, I would have.
Okay. And if there's been any inference that it went to the buttons on the left side of the jacket, that would be incorrect.
That is correct.
Now, you also took some other evidence from the decedent, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What other items were you responsible for collecting?
Okay. I collected the white material from the decedent's abdomen.
Okay. And you collected that because at the time you didn't know whether it was a nail particle or a tooth particle, correct?
I didn't know what it was.
Right.
Could have been one of those items. It could have been something else.
Okay. And that's why on your reports and on your chain of custody, you put possible nail or possible tooth, correct?
In my notes, it says possible nail, possible tooth. On the evidence log, it just says white material.
White material. And that's because somebody else has to come along and decide what that is, right?
Correct.
But that was an item that you could see, right?
Correct.
All right. Now, you also said, did you collect the lipstick, right?
I did.
Okay. And that lipstick was where you could see it, right?
Yes.
Okay. It hadn't fallen underneath, below the bra, right?
It was not below the bra.
You could actually see it, the tip of it coming out here.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in addition to the lipstick and the items that you talked about, you did a rape kit collection, correct?
I collected a sexual assault kit.
Sexual
yes.
assault kit, all right? And that occurred and you were very careful in that, right?
Yes.
All right. And one of the things you swabbed in the sexual assault kit was the nipples of the decedent, right?
Yes, I performed a left breast swab and a right breast swab.
Okay. And you actually call it a nipple swab, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you did that on both breasts, correct?
Correct.
All right. And did you actually, let me just go back up. Where you saw the lipstick was here.
The lipstick was right underneath of the left breast.
Underneath of the left breast, okay? And so you did a separate swab for the right nipple, correct?
Correct.
And the left nipple, correct?
Correct.
You did not swab underneath where the lipstick was, correct?
No, I did not.
And then you put those swabs into a packet, right?
Yes.
You air dry them first, correct?
That is correct.
Because you want to make sure that whatever is collected from that area and any area is not contaminated, right?
Correct.
So you want to make sure that you get a good swab because you know that in the future on those swabs, DNA testing will be done, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And therefore, you want to be very careful that you don't contaminate any of those, correct?
That is correct.
You also at the scene took fingernail scrapings. Am I correct on that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And scrapings are different than cuttings, right?
Yes, they are.
A cutting is when you actually cut a fingernail with a nail clipper type device.
Yeah, when I take clippings, I would use a pair of scissors and I would cut across the nail, the tip of the nail, getting as close to the bed as possible. But in this case, I collected scrapings, which I use about a 6-inch long wooden stick. We call it a manicure stick. And it's got flat edges on both sides. And you take that and you go right underneath of the nail, as close down to the bed as you can get, hoping to pick up any foreign material.
All right. And you go as close as you can so that you pick up any foreign material. And the reason for that is you want to see if there was a struggle, correct?
That's one of the reasons.
That's
correct.
one of the reasons. Very careful in your collection of the so you didn't see any foreign material. You got really a good sample under there, correct?
Yes, I collected scrapings under every single nail.
Okay. And then when you went back to the coroner's office, you had the right thumb nail of, you asked Dr. Pena and Investigator Nelson to excise or cut out the right thumbnail of Ms. Clarkson, right?
That is correct.
And at the scene, when you saw that right thumbnail, you did not see any blood on that right thumbnail, correct?
I do not recall if there was blood.
There was nothing in your notes on that, correct?
Not on blood, no.
Okay. And you don't recall seeing any black type sooting from a gun either on that?
No.
Correct?
Correct.
All right. And so when you got to the coroner's office, you had that nail cut out, right?
That is correct.
And when you cut that nail out, you do get blood, a little bit of blood and tissue on it, right?
it's a possibility.
Okay. Had you seen pictures of it since? Do you know?
I don't recall seeing any pictures of the nail after.
Okay, because Dr. Pena and Miss Nelson, Mrs. Nelson were responsible for it, right?
That is, well, they removed it and then I packaged it.
And you packaged it. So you don't recall what it is because they were the ones responsible for removing it. You just packaged it.
That is correct.
All right. And you weren't the one responsible for taking any pictures of it either, right?
I would direct photography to take pictures of the nail, yes.
Right. And that was the same type of thing that you did at the scene with regard to the blood spatter on the hand. You requested somebody to take pictures.
That is correct.
And you hope that their pictures come out well.
That is correct.
And if they don't, there's not much you can do about that time because it's somebody else's responsibility.
That is correct.
Okay. And with regard to the nails, you also were present when they were clipped. Ms. Clarkson's nails were clipped, right? Or thumbnails were clipped?
We did not clip the thumbnail.
You did not clip the nails?
No, the right nail was excised. The other nails, scrapings were collected, not clippings.
Okay, so you were never present when any of either of Ms. Clarkson's thumbnails were clipped? Is that what you're saying?
No, she's saying that's correct.
Oh, no, I'm asking you because I wasn't there.
I'm not aware that they were clipped.
Okay, all right. The last time you saw the nails, they just had scrapings taken under them.
The scrapings and the right thumbnail excised.
And if there was any clipping done to the right thumbnail, that was not done in your presence, was it?
That is correct.
Now, is there anything else that you did with regard to the collection of evidence from the body that you have not talked to us about?
I did collect a hair kit.
A hair kit?
A hair kit.
And what is that for?
Primarily, it is used as a reference standard. We collect hairs from various parts of the decedent so that if similar hairs are found at scene, they can use it as a comparison purpose to rule out whether or not it belonged to the decedent.
Okay. And any other kits that you collected?
May I refer to my
Yes,
notes?
please. Would like you to.
Okay. So we've got the GSR kit. We've got the fingernail kit. The damaged nail kit was the kit used to package the excised thumbnail. The hair kit, the pubic hair kit. Pubic hair kit is the same thing as the hair kit, except for it's a more specific region. Sexual assault kit. And those are the kits that I collected.
And then anything you collected, you put your name on the kit and you sent it off to your evidence store for further use by somebody else later?
The evidence control room, yes.
Okay. Besides the conversation that you had, by the way, with Mr. Renteria about the jacket, did you have any further conversation about the purge that was on the back?
Okay, now I'm curious because she said excised. And I thought I knew what excised. Oh, the beep's gone. I figured it out. I thought I knew what excised was because I am a nurse after all. Dang it. I keep spilling my diamond dots. So I looked it up just to make sure. Excised means to cut out surgically. So they excised her thumbnail. I'm assuming the thumbnail that got the acrylic was knocked off of it. So, I can't remember this lady's name. I actually like this lawyer because she asks questions and she's not all like accusatory and, like the other lawyers are. They're like confrontive. She's asking questions. That's what a lawyer should do. Well, in some cases they need to be combative, but I like her anyway. But she keeps saying the nails were clipped. And this lady's saying she's unaware that the nails were clipped. So were they clipped or not clipped? Excised means her thumbnail was cut out. Like the whole nail was cut off of her thumb. Does this lady not know what excise means? Why did they excise just the thumbnail? That would be my question. If you didn't cut the other nails, why are you excising that one thumbnail? I have questions. Why did they do that?
Back of the left arm down below where the elbow is, so just below the elbow, with anybody else from the coroner's office? Did you yourself discuss it?
Well, everyone that was there during the processing of the decedent and the jacket was aware of what had happened and the documentation that followed. And then on the 10th of February, I had a phone conversation with Mr. Renteria in regards to the contamination of the left sleeve.
Okay. And then is it fair to say that another conversation you also had, not related to the left sleeve, was with Mr. Renteria about white particles that were on the gun?
Yes, we did have a conversation about that.
And that was on February 13, 2003?
Let me check. That is correct.
Okay. And you called Mr. Renteria, right?
No, Mr. Renteria called me.
Okay. And what did you talk to him about? What did you say to him with regard to that call?
Appears to be hearsay.
What did she say to him?
The conversation,
I'm just
meaningless
asking,
if it's just a one-way conversation.
but I want to ask her side of the conversation, Your Honor, but that's not hearsay.
It is hearsay.
Did you ever facilitate the bringing to white material from the coroner's office to the Los Angeles Sheriff's Lab?
I did organize the process.
Okay. And you were facilitating bringing white materials that you collected at the autopsy?
No.
What were you bringing?
Well, it was based on the conversation that I had with Mr. Renteria on the phone. He advised me of some white particulate matter that he wanted analyzed. So I facilitated the process of getting him in touch with the medical examiner and the odontologist at our office to have that analyzed.
Okay. And after you facilitated that process of having this white material analyzed, did you have anything further to do with it?
No, I did not.
Okay. And by the way, with regard to anything concerning this case, after you did your report, your typewritten report in February of 2003, did you do any further, or excuse me, March of 2003, did you do any further typewritten reports in this case?
I did not do a further report, no.
Typewritten?
Oh.
If you did.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, the date?
Besides your March 10th, 2003 typewritten report in this case, did you do any further typewritten reports?
No, I did not.
Did you do any further written reports?
No, I did not.
Did you take any further notes regarding any conversations you had with anybody else in this case?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Your Honor, if I just have 1 minute.
Certainly.
One other question with regard to our little conference over here. At the time you collected the damaged nail kit from the right thumb, and you put the nail in, was the fingernail clipped?
No, it was not.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Redirect? Actually, I should ask, how long is your redirect?
Going to be a few questions.
All right, then in that case, we'll go ahead and take our noon recess. Keep in mind the admonition, ladies and gentlemen, 1:30, you may step down. Present with his counsel, the district attorneys are present, the jurors, alternates, and witnesses are present. You may proceed, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. Just a few questions. Kenny Bodden asked you a number of questions during your cross-examination.
You guys. It's Terry's birthday. Happy birthday, Terry. Everybody tell Terry happy birthday.
At one point, she put up a pair of pantyhose that was a defensive exhibit. Do you recall those? And you said they were inside out. There's some questions about a small bandage. Do you recall that?
I do.
And I think that you said that you recovered those or took those off at the crime scene. Is that correct?
I did not take them off at the crime scene.
Where did you do that?
I removed them at the coroner's office.
When you collected the rest of Lana Clarkson's clothing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you were also asked a number of questions about, remember all the pictures of the guns that were put, the gun that was put up there?
Yes,
And then some questions about the holster or all holster, is that right?
that is correct.
Would that have been, for example, the gun, would that have been something that was important to you that you were focused on in your job as a coroner's criminalist that day?
That was not part of my job responsibility.
And why not?
It was not directly on the decedent.
So that would have been in this kind of division of labor that we were talking about earlier. That would have been for the sheriff's department, homicide investigators, and their criminalists to work with.
That is correct.
So when these detectives were looking at the gun or where, I mean, that just wasn't something that you were focused on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And would that also hold true with respect to the holster? Ms. Kinney Bodden suggested that there was a holster in a small, I guess for want of a better word, a desk with a drawer in it next to Ms. Clarkson. Did you pay any attention to that, or is that something that you were supposed to focus on there, that holster?
No, my job is specifically what is on the decedent. I was not aware of the holster.
You were also asked some questions about, and I'll ask you to explain this a little bit more, taking some samples or swabs of the decedent's hands. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you do that to the left or the right or both?
Both hands.
And using, well, may I approach? I don't know how's best to do this, but.
I collected samples on the outside of the wrist, of both the left wrist and the right wrist, in this region here.
Yeah, Mr. Dixon, perhaps if you went from the back and faced that way, everybody.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Your Honor. This is better.
So this is where I collected samples from.
On both hands?
On both hands, or wrists.
And her wrists were in whatever position you found them at the time, correct?
That is correct.
But they were on, not the front of the, not on the palms, but on the back of the hand.
That is correct.
So if I or she.
Why does it keep beeping?
Is that correct?
Wait. It has never done that before. I always charge my phone here.
That is a possibility.
And you also were asked a number of questions by me and Ms. Kinney Bodden about the jacket and your efforts to preserve that left sleeve and what happened. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And you referred to a number of times during your testimony to your notes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit about these notes. When do you take them? Are they handwritten? Do you type them out later on? Tell us about
These
that.
notes are handwritten. I take them at the time that I am doing the evidence collection. They're written on what we call a Form 42. It's a pink sheet of paper provided by our office. And I documented on page 5 of my notes a brief description of what had happened, what had occurred with moving the decedent onto the left side for photography and for purge coming from her nose, and then on what area of the jacket that was contaminated.
Right. And as you said, that's on this Form 42, right?
That is correct.
And that's a form used by the coroner's office, kind of a generic form just to make notes on. Is that correct? To make notes on.
That is correct. It's a pink piece of paper with blank lines on it, and you write your notes on it.
And on your Form 42 that you made out for the the day we're talking about, February 3rd of 2003, on page 9, or excuse me, at page 5 of your 9 pages of notes, you noted that moving the decedent caused blood flow from nose onto department plastic outer left sleeve of jacket was resting in fresh pool of blood, right side unaffected. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And those are the notes that you made at the time.
Yes, they are.
So that the left sleeve was in according to this, a pool of blood at some point as a result of the movement of the decedent. Is that right?
That is correct.
Could I have a moment, please, Your Honor? Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you. Recross.
When Mr. Dixon just read that to you, you made a note that it was the outer left sleeve, correct?
It was the outer left sleeve.
Outer left sleeve of the jacket. Okay. Now, Mr. Dixon just asked you a question using hands up. You're not a blood spatter person. Expert,
I am
right?
not a blood spatter
So
expert.
you don't know whether spatter is created with somebody having their hands like this, correct? Showing my hands clasped, correct?
My statement to Mr. Dixon was that that was a possibility.
And there's a lot of other possibilities too, isn't there?
That is correct.
Because you're not a blood spatter expert.
That is correct.
Now, Mr. Dixon also asked you questions about the pantyhose. When you collected the pantyhose and you did everything to the body at the scene, I assume you wore gloves, correct?
Yes, I did.
And everyone from the coroner's office at the scene wore gloves, correct?
Yes, they did.
That's supposed to protect you, correct? Partially?
That is correct.
And also to make sure that the evidence on the body is preserved, correct?
That is correct.
And so that you wouldn't, for chance, leave your fingerprint on the body, correct?
That is one of the reasons.
Or on any other portion of her clothes, correct?
Yes, that is one of the reasons for wearing gloves.
And when you collected the pantyhose that he mentioned, along with all the other clothes, you didn't see any rips, tears, or anything in the clothes, did you?
There's nothing that I noted.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Thank you very much.
Redirect.
No, thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
All right, subject to recall, you're excused. Thank you for being here. You may step down.
Thank you.
Do you have another witness?
Yes, we do, Your Honor. Donna Rendelli.
Okay, guys. No streamer will cooperate. Okay, that is it for Phil Spector today. But Shanna Gardner had another hearing this morning. I did not know that. So we are going to head over to a new stream. Hang on just a minute. Well, okay, so we're gonna go head over to a new stream. I set it for 11:30, but we're gonna go now. I'll change the time. And I didn't redirect, so you're just gonna have to find it on your own. I'm sorry. So I'll see you guys over there. Bye.